across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, thank you to Alex Phillips. Back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Lots to get through here at the home of common sense. You might have clocked some of this. Kemi Badenoch demanding Andy Burnham rule out tax rises to fund social care reform as he simultaneously prepares to crack down on youth sickness benefits after it emerged teenage anxiety now pays more than going to work. I mean, if you uttered that statement a decade ago, you'd have been laughed out the room. That's the reality of our times, kids. Also this afternoon, compulsory voting is reportedly being considered by the Prime Minister's most senior advisers, with proposing a £10 fine for anyone who fails to turn up at the ballot box. 10 quid. Should be 10 grand. And an undercover Talk exclusive investigation into Manchester city centre has exposed the grim reality behind Andy Burnham's flagship city, with a reporter offered drugs 4 times in 2 hours and forced to break up a violent street brawl in the area that's now been dubbed Crackadilly. Yeah, I like it. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. You can message us, of course, 87222. It might be the weekend. It might have been the weekend. He took no time off at all. Yes, he's back. Off he cobbled over to Koonsberg's chair for a bit of a chinwag. I've never said... Well, what's the idea of kind of drip-feeding an Andy Burnham interview as if it's the next episode of Stranger Things? Well, it kind of is in a curious way, isn't it? And here's the clip where he says this, and here's the clip where he says that. Look, let's cut to the chase here. Here's the deal. I'll play you a bit of that clip in a second. For decades, every government has promised to fix social care. Every government has failed. Meanwhile, ordinary families are handed bills that can exceed £1,500 or even £2,000 a week. A week, 100 grand a year for a care home. Think about that. After paying taxes all your life, after buying a home, after saving responsibly, one illness can wipe out everything that you have ever built up. Andy Burnham says he wants a national care service free on the NHS principle and insists he'll spend political capital to finally grasp the nettle. He says the NHS will collapse unless we sort this out.
I will go as quickly as I can on the reform of social care. Well, it's not, because a whole new system, which is what you asked, takes time. I think there are major changes you can make before the next election. This costs the NHS billions of pounds.
Billions of pounds indeed. So it's an admirable ambition, but where does the money come from? That is the question. Every single Prime Minister. Do you remember back in 2017 when Theresa May thought she'd really cracked this and she came up with this one and decided, I think this is going to work. Her proposed reforms were instantly, I mean, the words had hardly left her mouth before somebody, I think it might have been Jeremy Corbyn, I think a couple of Lib Dems gave it a go as well, branded it a death tax or a dementia tax. Bang, that was it. It was dead in the water. Finished, done. The moment it was given that title, it was finished. Because these people are not really interested they're more interested in politics, the Corbynites. And so what she came up with was something that kind of resonated and made a little bit of sense. And ever since then, politicians have run a mile from the issue. The most uncomfortable truth is that someone has to pay, right? We can all agree on that. Somebody has to pay. So who pays? Now, of course, when the welfare state and Beveridge and Bevin and co were putting things together, and they were looking at the sort of 4 pillars or the 4 ills of society as to what has gone wrong, what needs addressing. Nobody thought people were going to live to the kind of age they did. Nobody thought people could survive, but maybe not completely, but for many, many years with certain illnesses. You know, you got diagnosed with a bit of cancer, you were gone in months. Back in the 40s, there was hardly treatment for any of this stuff. Some of it had yet to even be discovered or even fully diagnosed as a cancer. So Nobody was thinking this way. So up they go, trotting with the welfare state. We can do this, we can do that. Nobody said, oh, by the way, you do know that in about 90 years from now, people will be living about 20 years longer. And even those that are living without any issue to start with may get themselves a disease which would kill them now, but will keep them alive for another 20 or 30 years. So that's the problem that we encountered with all of this, and that's where we're at. Somebody has to pay. Now, one option would be simple, and that would be a transparent levy on estates after death. Say 10% ring fence solely for social care. Not a raid on pensions, not another stealth tax, a clear social contract. Society guarantees dignified care in old age, and everyone contributes from what they leave behind. It wouldn't please everyone, particularly those who leave nothing behind, of course. They would be the ones that would stand to benefit. But unlike today's chaotic lottery, at least it would be honest. 10% when you die, whatever's in the bank, add your house in there as well. 10% back to the state, pays for social care. I can't think of another way. Can you? 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. And if you've been in that position, I mean, I can't believe the eye-watering, 1,500, £2,000 a week. Couldn't you hire a nurse to live in your house for that amount of money? And if that wasn't enough, we've got another welfare issue to deal with as well. Andy Burnham gambling on one of the biggest political risks in Britain, welfare reform. His proposals are simple. OK, if young people claim sickness benefit, they should engage in training, education or voluntary work where they're able. It's modelled on a Dutch system. And frankly, many voters will ask why this wasn't the expectation already. The numbers are staggering. Of course, the welfare bill heading towards 330 billion quid. New figures suggest some teenagers claiming the highest rate of disability benefits for conditions like anxiety can receive 100 quid a week more than one of their own age group actually going to work. When you hear this, you think this is satire, right? What, you can get more having anxiety than going to work? Yes, that is where we are at, I'm afraid. Welfare should be a safety net, not a destination, as we keep saying. If work, training and contribution cease to be the default expectation, then the system risks trapping young people in dependency before they've even had a chance to start building a working life. Thoughts on that as well? 0344 499 1000. How do we fund social care? How do we fix the welfare state as well? I mean, these are two fundamental questions, costing us billions in also the people at the beginning of their working life and the people at the end of their working life. Both on this equation. I want your experiences, your views, 0344 499 1000. Let's get to work with Ellie Hodges, political commentator with her. Good to see you, Ellie.
Good to see you as well.
Listen, you are literally in this cohort in terms of age. So you're, what, 19?
Yeah.
So this is... You managed to say, I'm not doing the university route, I'm doing something else.
Absolutely not.
I championed that, did it myself, and, you know, things seem to be OK.
Yeah.
So, but what about your own experience of your own mates and friends in this kind of area?
The part-time job issue at the moment is a really, really big one, and I think that a lot of people haven't really been talking about this until now, and it's so important. I had 3 part-time jobs in the end whilst I was in education, and they were all working in a pub or a restaurant, and they taught me so many things. They taught me hard work, they taught me, actually, I need to turn up on time or else I won't have the job.
True.
They taught me having to actually, you know, getting things wrong and being told that's not right, it's not what you're doing is wrong. But also the process of actually getting the job was important as well, because I was rejected from places lots and lots of times when I asked to get a job, and it taught me actually you just have to keep going. And I think a lot of young people, and I know this from talking to young people, they send one email to someone saying, can I have a part-time job? And they reply, oh, sorry, we don't have any vacancies at the moment. Oh, I give up.
That's the last email they ever sent.
It's a waste of time.
So what made you swerve the uni thing and just a brief point on that and go straight into it? Is it because you knew you wanted to do something in the line you're now doing?
Yes, but I only realised that actually probably quite later on. I never from really young, thought, OK, I definitely want to get into politics and want to be in the media. But once I decided, actually, that's something that I want to do, I thought, OK, I need to make this happen for myself. I got loads of work experience, a ridiculous amount of work experience, and they all led to jobs pretty much.
Sure.
And it gave me connections, it gave me experience, and I'm so glad that I did that. And I did that all myself, you know. I don't have a famous parent in politics or anything. I just emailed, and the majority of people didn't reply. But just a few that did meant that I could get my foot in the door.
Yeah, you've got to keep going in that kind of stuff, haven't you? And, of course, as somebody who's more on the right than the left, then going to university would have been, been like as mad as a box of frogs over there, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And, I mean, I've done
You'd have been sitting there in the corner on your own watching box sets.
Yeah, and I've done broke a few stories, actually, about this at universities. For example, the Sussex University one, where they set up a reform society and immediately were faced with death threats, harassment, social exclusion, all of these things. And this happens throughout education. And the problem is, we had the National Education Union, who have Zach Polansky speaking at their conference last year. Yeah. The majority of teachers are on the left, and they spent their conference, the NEU's conference, actually talking about how they're going to go back to the classroom and teach anti-reform teaching materials. So they genuinely believe it's their duty to stop students from having an opinion that is on the right and not on the left. And I don't say this lightly either. It's true, and I saw this myself. And I, by no means, saying that every single teacher is left-wing and it's some conspiracy to indoctrinate all of the young people. But when you have the majority of teachers that share the same ideology, they're going to naturally push certain beliefs. And we see this happen all the time, and it does need to stop. And I'm not saying that every single teacher should be right-wing. That's not what I'm saying. They should just be politically neutral.
Of course.
Simple.
And when you invite Zach Polansky, this is a man that wants to make heroin legal and renting out your house illegal. I mean, you realise what you're dealing with. That's extreme, kids. But back on let's look at the other end of the scale, decades away from where you are now. Social care. This is a massive problem. Everyone's tried to give it a go. Nobody can work it out. It's massively expensive. I mean, actually, social care, we tend to think of old people in
comes under lots of different things.
It's all over the place. It could be a 22-year-old with severe neurodiversity issues. It could be that. But fundamentally, for the benefit of this, what do you do with people in their old age? You put somebody in a care home. It could be $1,500, $2,000 a week. I don't know how they got to this level.
It's crazy, and I think the system is fundamentally flawed, and I'm glad that we're even having this conversation because it's long overdue. But we have got a situation where, and not a lot of people talk about this, but it is unfair that someone who bought a house in the 60s for what we would consider dirt cheap...
About 30 quid.
...that is now worth $1 million.
Yeah.
They would then have to pay now for care if they go into a care home because they're asset rich, but they could be cash poor.
Of course.
Whereas someone that's, you know, and I say this from family experience, someone who's lived in a council house all their lives will automatically get free care when they're older, and that is fundamentally flawed because just because someone's asset rich doesn't necessarily mean that they're loaded with cash.
I 100% agree with that, but there's a bit of me that goes, is this now the only way? Is it the only... Is there no other way around this? So if you leave behind a house that's worth £500,000, the state are going to take 10%. And if you've got 10 grand in the bank, the state are going to take 500... I couldn't think of 5%. No, 10%. They're going to take a grand out of that. So they'll take that money from you. And yes, it does mean that the people down the road never did a day's work in their life will also benefit from that pot. But is there, you know, I keep thinking, do we just have to swallow that one and go, that's how it is? It's
really difficult, and it's something that I'm glad that we're actually discussing because it is fundamentally flawed, and it's the same with the NHS, although obviously they're actually considered very separate from each other. The NHS at the moment, no matter how much money we pump into it, and I say this as someone whose family member has recently had quite a long period staying in an NHS hospital, it is broken and it needs to be fixed. But we've seen over the past decade, just pumping loads of more money into it doesn't actually solve any issues. Something needs to change in terms of the structure of it, and I think that's the same with adult social care as well. But we do have to remember, of course, that adult social care is means tested in terms of how if you pay for it or not. Not like the NHS at all.
It's interesting because back to the other end of the scale, then people who are off work with anxiety is a thing. Look, I have to put this caveat in. I don't want to sensationalise anything. I'm sure there's more to the story when I don't think you just go, oh, I'm feeling a bit rubbish. And someone goes, here's £300 a week. No. I don't think that happens, but something happens that never used to. We know that much. So you've got young people who are in a position where they're earning more money by being on a disability arrangement than somebody like you were just saying about, you know, giving it take a job in the Spoons, take a job in, you know, McDonald's, wherever it happens, Costa, anything you like, those kind of hospitality jobs. You're earning more with the anxiety thing going on, because your head's feeling a bit weird, and our heads all feel a bit weird from time to time. I woke up this morning feeling a bit weird, you know, still do, frankly. But then I don't think that should qualify me for a benefit of some sort.
No, of course not.
I think that's just a thing called life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have a good day, bad day. You might have bad days last a few days.
Yeah.
You might have good days last a few days.
This is the thing. It's quite subjective, actually. And when I interviewed Catherine, who's known as the strictest head teacher in Britain, and I asked her about how there's some classes where the majority of people in state schools have special educational needs. How do you deal with that? And her response was, well, the key word there is special. If the majority of people have it, then it's no longer special. And I thought that was a really important point to make, because if you have a situation where the majority of people in a school have some sort of special educational needs, what do you physically do? And it's the same here with benefits. We can't just keep giving them out for people who have mild anxiety. You know, it just can't. You can't do it because we can't afford it, quite frankly.
We can't afford it, and it's also bloody ridiculous. I mean, £100 a week more than somebody on a part-time job or on minimum wage, as an example.
No,
how did we arrive there? I don't ever remember a time when this was announced as a policy. It suddenly snuck in under the radar.
It's crazy.
Where suddenly the criteria for entitlement has just moved into this rather bizarre territory. And some of these people don't even go for face-to-face interviews to get this stuff. So you do it online and things.
And it's not even... Back to kind of the part-time job thing, it's not even just about the money that you earn from doing that and the money that you're obviously putting into the economy. It's actually about, as I said, the skills that you learn and how important it is. And a lot of people that might actually have anxiety or might have some special educational needs, sometimes going into work is actually a really good way to kind of learn what your skills are and learn how to cope around certain issues. And I think that by kind of putting young people in a bubble where everything's safe and everything's perfect, which is what happens at universities and schools, you're not teaching them anything about the real world. And you're not teaching them that to be motivated, to be determined, and that, you know, sometimes you do have to do a bit of hard work and it will eventually pay off. And when I started having my part-time job, I loved it. I loved being able to, every month I got, you know, money coming into my account, and I felt like I earned it. And that's really, really important. And if there is any young people listening and they're thinking, I can't get a part-time job, my advice would be, although a lot of the time people at school, teachers will say, just apply online, apply on LinkedIn, I genuinely think, and it's how I got all my jobs, the best thing to do, go into your local town, go into every pub, every restaurant, and introduce yourself and say, I'd really like a part-time job, is that possible?
Exactly.
Because managers and owners of businesses actually prefer you going in, showing your face, showing confidence and showing initiative, actually, and they're much more likely to give you the job.
And if you don't get a job there, you can stay there and get hammered, can't you? So, I mean, it's a win-win. It's a win-win. One here says, so, Ian Collins, you want a 10% death tax on estates, including houses bequeathed. That will kill off dreams of aspiring homeowners. What then when our home-owning families rely on the state for housing? Oh, I know. Communism will solve it. I can't solve it. I don't even know. I don't think when you buy a house, if you're like 25, and I mean, it's quite hard to buy a house at 25, I don't think you tend to go, oh, I better not buy it because in 80 years' time...
Ian, I didn't take you as a communist, apparently.
I hope I'm not. Definitely not in that category. Anyway, and most people don't think they're going to get ill either, and most don't, by the way. Not badly. 0344 499 1000. More from Ellie coming up after this.
be here with you all in the heart of Manchester this Friday morning at the end of, you know, a fairly big week. Is just everything to me.
If I have to watch one more saccharine video of him pulling a pint or talking about his favourite bar snacks with John Healey, whatever mawkish, minimalising, utterly moronic, stupid bit of social media tidbit they're trying to throw to us, you know, the sugar to help the Marxist medicine go down.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Somebody here, no name given, says this young lady speaks more sense than anyone currently in government.
Thanks.
That's to me, Ellie.
Oh, yeah, of course.
To identify as a young lady.
Oh, yeah, of course, sorry.
God,
sorry, I'm really sorry, I just misgendered you.
Unbelievable. Call Ofcom. This one, again, no name. What is it about the anonymous text today? What's happening here? So, as usual, those who spend all their money or spend their life on welfare get to pay nothing. The problem is that on top of the 40% inheritance tax, it's taken the proverbial out of the hard worker and savers, giving all the others a free ride. Yeah, it would. It would give you a free ride. I don't know another answer. I don't. Where'd you get the money from? Where does it come from? You've got to try and balance the books. Let's move on to this subject, though, and this is about compulsory voting. Andy Burnham insists he won't call an election. Voters don't want one. Curious, then, that people around him have been drawing up plans to force voters to the polls with a threat of a £10 fine for those who don't turn up. Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister on respecting what voters want.
I will go as quick. I've got the support of colleagues in Parliament, and it's a parliamentary democracy that we're in. Rule it out? Well, I'm going to rule it out, yeah. There's no early general election. I don't think people want it.
Why does he give those big pauses before he starts speaking, though? What's all that about? Strange, isn't it? Just to think about what he's going to say. No early election. That usually means there is going to be an early election. That seems to be how it goes. One poll that's out in the last half an hour has put Labour above Reform. That ordinarily wouldn't have been a big story. Reform's been going, you know, for half an hour. However, for the last couple of years, they've been leading in every single poll.
Yeah, we are seeing kind of the gap between I'd say the three main political parties at the moment, Labour, Conservatives and Reform, definitely closing a little bit. And I think that's because, one, with the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch's personal popularity is actually quite high. However, the party's isn't, because people still remember what they would describe as the Conservatives failing them, really. And then we have Labour now, and I do think that with Andy Burnham coming in, there is hope in the Labour Party, and I think I saw that in Makerfield. So I went up to Makerfield, and when I saw people campaigning for Labour, there were a lot of young people, and there were people with signs saying, vote Andy, vote Hope, speakers blaring music and dancing around. And it was giving off, not to use Andy Burnham's words, but a good vibe. So I do think that there is some energy back in the Labour Party of Andy Burnham coming in. It's just how long that will actually last. Well,
if he keeps making those TikTok videos, it's not going to last very long, is it?
Yeah, I know, the TikTok videos. I mean,
this is meant to make people your age, Ellie, go, oh, ain't he cool?
Well, I mean, I think there is a tiny bit of that, people seeing him on social media and thinking, actually, he's all right. And I think, as well, he's kind of got an advantage because Keir Starmer was just so boring and had zero personality whatsoever. Even if someone with a tiny bit of personality comes in, he kind of has an advantage.
Didn't take much, did it, really?
It didn't take much.
Didn't take much at all.
That's the only advantage that he has.
Should we make voting compulsory?
Well, what a question, Ian. I mean, I think I'm quite split on this because I guess it would mean that more people would be involved in politics and more politically engaged. But then you also have, firstly, £10 is not a lot of money. I don't think people that aren't going to vote, I don't think are suddenly going to vote because of a £10 fine. And also, you might get people actually voting and they're not really informed at all on what they're actually voting for. And I was actually speaking to the producer of your show just before I came on, and we were talking about how...
She used that word very loosely, Ellie.
We were talking about how...
I never knew I'd been assigned a producer. Why did nobody tell me that?
We were talking about how if people were forced to vote, they wouldn't actually, even though there is an option to say none of the above, a lot of people will pick a political party anyway, just because they saw a tweet last week that they slightly agreed with.
This is true. I mean, when you look at this, the 2024 general election, so you wouldn't have been old enough to vote, right?
No.
That's madness.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you're sitting here and you do national TV and all sorts of other bits now, talking about this stuff. So that's how, I mean, you're incredibly engaged with it. I can't imagine that's going to be the case at the next election. But 24%, the turnout was 56% among 18 to 24-year-olds, compared with 81% of over 61s. Now, Australia introduced compulsory voting in 1920. I didn't even know Australia was going in 1924. I didn't know it existed. It wasn't much before then, was it? So like 100 odd years ago. And turnout has only fallen below 90% once since they introduced it. But you don't really get fined very much. And they're talking about a tenner. No one's going to lose sleep
I don't think it's very democratic, either, forcing people to vote.
Well, that's also a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a double edge. You know, ideally, we want everybody to vote.
No one's calling for it either. It might just be one of these things that he's just saying and will never actually implement. Yeah, no one wants it. No one's campaigning for it. I just think it's a bit of a waste of time, really.
Let's finish on this one. And we'll have to be quite brief, but a reminder firstly, Ellie, do you remember these two cases?
The current system is being exploited. The public are enraged at the perception that the UK has become a haven for foreign criminals. One case involved a man who was allowed to stay. It was claimed that his son disliked foreign chicken nuggets. In another, a drug dealer reportedly avoids deportation because of his daughter's gender identity issues.
Man alive, this is the kind of weird world we're living in. We can add another one to that list now, and this is the Albanian drug dealer, lovely fella, who's avoided deportation because his daughter wet the bed. Shrepsim Koka, I'll try and get that correct, told the court that she needed therapeutic intervention after her accidents worsened during his time in jail. He arrived in Britain in 2001 claiming to be a refugee. I don't know how old his daughter is. She might be 70, which is a bit weird. Or she might be 7. I have no idea. I'm assuming she's a kid. Since when did that become a reason to not be deported? Because your kid wets the bed.
I mean, I just struggle to find the words because it's such a joke. And I mean, when you hear all of these cases, and there's more cases than just them two as well, you have these human rights lawyers that seem to be actively working against this country's interests. And you have all of these cases with asylum applications and these deportations as well, where even you have to give it to Shabana Mahmood a little bit when she's actually said, OK, this person should be deported, I don't care. And these human rights lawyers have so much power that they can actually say, no, I think they should stay. And it just does make me think, why do these human rights lawyers want them to stay so much?
What is their thinking behind this? I mean, this fellow was jailed for 21 months back in 2017 after handing over more than £300,000 to a money laundering gang. He was initially due to be deported after serving his sentence, remained in Britain, later imprisoned for 3 years for cocaine dealing. How does the money laundering and the cocaine dealing not usurp the bedwetting bit?
It's just not popular with anyone either, what they are doing here, and it's just insane. I mean, the chicken nugget story I still think does top this one, because that was just outrageous. I mean, the excuses that they come up with.
Yeah.
I mean, they're quite good actually. The excuses. I mean, how they come up with these things is just insane.
Did you know that we discovered a little factoid? I think I've got this right, Finn. That Albania doesn't have any McDonald's, right? Bizarrely, I mean, McDonald's are literally everywhere. I think there's one in my bedroom if I look hard enough. I mean, they're everywhere, right? But Albania, no McDonald's.
I mean, who advises these people as well to go in and say, yeah, sorry, my daughter doesn't like chicken nuggets, or my daughter
works for the chicken nugget defence.
Like, who is advising these people? Surely there's some better, genuine excuses here.
You might think so. There could be. I could come up with better stuff than this. Listen, we've hit the clock, Ellie. Good to see you, though.
Really good to see you.
It's Ellie's first time on our show,
I know, it's crazy.
Listen, we've been rooting. I told you out there, we've been rooting for you a long time. Finn, our producer, another young person on the block's a bit of a threat to him, really. think that's all it is. Thank you to Ellie. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. How do we fund social care and how do we fix the welfare state? Two questions there just to be going on with. A couple more voices on the way. And, of course, more from you. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 2, this comes in from Alan. He says, Ian, great show. Love the sense of humour. Following up from what Ellie was saying, I've just read that Brewers Fayre are closing all 89 restaurants. I didn't know this, with the loss of 3,800 jobs. That's massive. They put the reason down to costs, including national insurance hike. This is once again going to hit youngsters and part-time workers with a well-known brand going to the wall. How has this country got a chance when none of the present cabinet has any business experience? We are intercoursed. Never really heard that expression, but I like it. Keep up the good work, says Alan. Love it. Lots to talk through here. Kemi Badenoch says social care crisis can be solved by the market and that Andy Burnham must rule out tax rises to fund the reform. It's fitting, then, that Andy Burnham is cracking down on youth sickness benefits elsewhere after it emerged that teen anxiety now pays more than actually going to work. If I'd have uttered that sentence 10 years ago, somebody would have reported me to Ofcom for making things up. But this is how the world has shifted and how things have changed. We'll be speaking to the sociologist Frank Furedi in just a second. First, Ben Gregg, Head of Welfare at the Centre for Social Justice. Ben, good to have you with us. This one doesn't really go away. Nobody can quite work out at what point it would be preposterous to have got benefits for anxiety and at what point it became pretty standard. I don't think there was any great announcement. Suddenly we found ourselves discussing this almost on a weekly basis. Where did this come from, for goodness sake?
Yeah, it's come from a whole series of changes within the welfare system. Bluntly, I mean, fundamentally, it's come from shifts around eligibility, particularly for personal independence payments, which is the main disability benefit, for the health element of universal credit. What we've seen is a steady shift in actually the eligibility requirements, partly through the upper tribunal's appeals process, which has slowly sort of expanded the legal understanding of what different bits of eligibility mean, and have meant that it's easier to get it for mental health and for disorders like anxiety disorders and general depressive disorders. So I think there's been a legal shift, and then that's been coupled with, obviously, with the pandemic, with the emphasis that's been put on mental health, with wider cultural shifts. Those two have sort of multiplied off each other, and we're now sort of stuck in this situation where the financial incentives, the eligibility requirements, and the cultural changes have all worked together to create a sort of toxic cocktail on our welfare system. And
I don't think it's, people often divide down party lines when it comes to these kind of issues. You know, the left think big state, throw more money at the welfare system, never cut back. We know that Starmer had that problem when he tried to convince his backbenchers to, at least have a look at the numbers. They didn't want to look at them. No, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It was such a tiny kind of attempt as well. It wasn't even something huge. So, and then of course people on the right stereotypically want less state intervention. But with something like this, you'd like to think that common sense would prevail, and anyone, whether you're left wing or right wing, would say it cannot be acceptable that you can get more money being off work because of anxiety than you would if you had a full-time job on minimum wage.
Yeah, I think it's the social scandal actually that's kind of cutting through most with people across the political spectrum. I mean, we saw with sort of the Miliband review coming out and sort of this sense of there needs to be a national mission, particularly for young people who are on health-related benefits and who aren't in work. And I think it is drawing it back to, yes, it costs us fiscally. Yes, it's bad that people can earn more on benefits than going out to being in work, but actually that it's bad for them. When you look at, for example, again, PIP, one of the big things that comes through is hypothetically you can get PIP and be in work. But when you then talk to people who are on PIP, when you talk to them about whether they would, the response you get back is, well, I worry that if I go and work, I'll get reassessed, I'll lose my benefit, that will be used as evidence against me, and I'll be worse off. So why would I? And actually, there was a really interesting bit in the recent Tim's review, the interim report came out.
Yeah.
And there was a quote from someone who said how fearful they were of just going out to exercise in case they lost their benefit. And when you're in a state where you're saying, if you're on health-related benefits, the fear of just being active is keeping you locked indoors.
Yeah.
That's not healthy for the people who it's in. It is not helping them.
So we've got a number of things going on in the welfare department, Ben, because we have, obviously, at one end, young people in record numbers are not working because of things like anxiety. I know that can often be more complex than just that, but for the benefit of this. And then at the other end, we've got this social care problem, which everybody has claimed that they can maybe solve. Theresa May thought she got close in 2017 until Corbyn called it a dementia tax, and that was it. Bang, it was done, which seems a fairly intellectually weak position to be in when you were, the fact that somebody named it something in a sort of fairly cheap attempt to tackle it was enough to sort of stop it. Boris Johnson, we remember that speech when he became Prime Minister on Downing Street, on the steps there, stood there, finally I will solve the problem of social care. No one's managed to do this. Can Andy Burnham be the person that makes the difference?
Probably not, to be very blunt. I mean, this issue actually goes back, I guess, even further. It goes back, at least sort of 20 years when there was a certain health secretary called Andy Burnham who made a proposal around how to fund social care. And then that got labelled, I think, similarly like the death tax, I guess, similar to sort of Theresa May's dementia tax. So he's tried to fix this before and not succeeded. And I think ultimately the problem it comes down to is if you want to nationalise social care, that's kind of the answer that you're going down, which seems to be kind of very much the Labour approach. The cost is around £18 billion, and that's not hiding down the back of the sofa. That's a substantial amount of money to find, and any proposal to find that is going to create quite a lot of losers. Yeah,
and I seem to have arrived, and I'm not fully at this conclusion in this respect, Ben, but it seems to me this idea that there's a hypothecated kind of tax after you've died, whether it's property or what you've got in the bank, 10% or something like that. That, to me, is I can only see that as the potential answer. It sounds terribly unfair for those who've got naff all, and particularly those who've got naff all because they design their own life that way, rather than those who might be on hard times. But I just can't see another answer. If it's about literally raising the money, is there any other alternative than saying we're going to ring fence X amount of % after you die?
I mean, there's been sort of several proposals. I think one of those that Kemi Badenoch referenced today was around some proposal around a kind of insurance-based system. Obviously, there was Boris Johnson's attempt with national insurance, I think realistically, neither of those are a silver bullet either. If you raise national insurance, you have the unfairness of kind of people who are in work feeling like they're paying even more for something that they might not necessarily benefit from. Even if you do an insurance-based system, is that auto-enrollment? Are you requiring people? In which case, it's again effectively a tax. I think it is probably heading towards something around that levy on estates. But obviously, you have the gut unfairness that's sort of been encapsulated in the dementia or death tax, and it possibly does take being bold, having a large majority, and being willing to do it.
Indeed.
Burnham's bold enough.
We will see. Ben, thank you for your time. Appreciate that. Ben Gregg, Head of Welfare at the Centre for Social Justice. Let's speak to the author and sociologist, Frank Furedi. Frank, afternoon to you. I guess it's that sort of, well, certainly when it comes to this business of social care, it's sort of Overton window territory, isn't it? You know, what is acceptable to some people, however, is not always acceptable to everybody. So it's tricky for politicians who think they've come up with the answer, only to be told, as Corbyn told Theresa May, this is a death tax, this is a dementia tax. Is it about winning the public over with something that sounds fair? I mean, there's so many tentacles to this one. What's at least the beginning of the journey to try to solve the problem?
I think you're right about the many tentacles, because at the root of all this problem is the fact that our institutions, like the National Health Service, like the social care system, are really broken. And most politicians refuse to recognize it. For example, no politician will say that the NHS is broken, even though everybody knows that's the reality. It's a sacred cow that cannot be questioned. Nobody really looks at the social care issue properly. And it seems to me that we've got to get a balance right here, because there's no way that no matter how much money you throw at the problem, there's going to be a solution, a finance-led solution. So therefore, you've got to take a step back and ask the question, how can we begin to use our communities? How can society itself change its attitude towards the elderly in particular? How can we make life better for them and take them more seriously? Because there's a problem of a lot of negative attitudes towards the elderly. Our society tries to ghettoize them as much as possible. And a lot of people live their life as they get to be 70 or 80 with absolutely no support whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that unless you take a step back and begin to address those issues and somehow work out a strategy whereby the communities themselves are principally responsible for the welfare of the elderly, because they are part of their community, there's going to be no solution here. After that, we get to the issues that you've been discussing with the previous guest, of how you finance these things. But it seems to me the key thing is we got to ask, what is the basic commitment that a state should have towards both the elderly, but also in terms of the way the health service works? What is the basic commitment? Because what has happened is that year in and year out, we've been medicalizing British people. And as we medicalize them, more and more people are defined as ill. More and more people become eligible for welfare payments. And that's got to stop, because not just simply because of the money, but because it destroys their lives. Young people who think that they're being very smart by getting benefits actually give up on taking control over their circumstances. And it seems to me that somehow or another, we just got to cut this out altogether. And no ifs and buts. It's just going to be something that we stop altogether. And once we begin to adopt a more radical orientation that brings in the community, but also ceases to medicalize British society, I think we can begin to see the outlines of an answer to this.
I do wonder at the two distinct stories here. One is the social care. I mean, social care, of course, is a big umbrella title for all manner of issues that adults may be experiencing or suffering from. But the purpose of this conversation, we're talking about the elderly who are ill and need assistance and need help. Other end of the scale, of course, this story of young people and anxiety. And I find this in many respects far more interesting in terms of where we're going as a society. I think that lots of those young people who say, I have crippling anxiety, are actually telling the truth. In their world, they have crippling anxiety. I don't mean they're making it up, but I think we've kind of recalibrated how we interpret some of this stuff. I also think we're living in a very tricky world, not just the financial pressures that we experience, daily cost of living, Frank, but all the other issues that go with it. What does the future look like? It's quite uncertain. Will I ever own a house, etc.? So there's quite a lot going on. And then I'm also reminded of that interesting interview that Elon Musk gave this weekend, where he actually said in one answer, what the government's just going to have to give everybody a paycheck, really, because we almost won't need to go to work. We're living in abundance and we won't need to worry. So, there's quite a lot to unpack in all of that, but it feels that we're in a very distinct era in this sense.
We are, and I think the easier part to solve are the young people, because there we can see very clearly the fact that young people from their school age onwards are being continuously medicalized. They're being continuously told that, you have this problem, that problem. They're given that diagnosis at the age of 8 or 9. A lot of parents embrace a diagnosis because it helps explain why little Mary or little Harry aren't reading properly. Alternatively, a lot of parents are delighted that their children have been given the diagnosis of ADHD, because that explains why these kids are out of control. But the problem is that the more we medicalize young people, instead of taking them seriously, instead of engaging with them and explaining to them that the problems they face are existential problems, not psychological ones. As long as we do that, then these young kids, when they're 20, 21, 22, actually believe that they're ill. They believe that because they're ill, they have the right to be helped out, that they should have welfare benefits. And it seems to me that somehow we're going to have to stop this process of turning young people into patients, which is really what we're doing, and instead treating them like potential citizens. And the medical profession, particularly the psychiatric industry, is very hostile to this at the moment. They're continually telling us that we don't talk about mental health enough. They continue telling us that there are all these problems that we haven't even addressed sufficiently. They talk about well-being as not the norm, but well-being is something you got to achieve by basically seeing a therapist or a professional. So as long as you have these interests, medicalizing young people, the problem will not be solved. And you have to remember that these young people, when they become 30, 40, or 50, are going to become even more susceptible to perceiving themselves as patients rather than as citizens.
Indeed. Frank, you make some great points, as ever. Thank you, sir. Great to have you on with us as well. That is Frank Furedi. He's the author and sociologist. Always good to gauge his views. Yeah, that's never going to get... I can't see how it would get better, really. I mean, there's going to be pockets of people that decide, oh, actually, I have a newfound ambition or desire to go to work. I'm going to go back to training or something like that. I'll do some voluntary work, which is what this Dutch model is kind of predicated on. I think that seems like a good idea. And still no idea how we got to the place where anybody would be in a situation like this. I'm not underplaying what extreme anxiety might feel like, and to those that have got crippling versions of that, we all get it. I just don't think many of us are sold on the sheer numbers, the sheer cost, and the sheer realistic, and I would like to think, without any bias involved, reality, that this has to be unacceptable. It cannot be. This cannot be allowed to continue without some sort of intervention. Is Burnham about to solve the problem? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
to be here with you all in the heart of Manchester this Friday morning at the end of, you know, a fairly big week. Is just everything to me.
If I have to watch one more saccharine video of him pulling a pint or talking about his favourite bar snacks with John Healey, whatever mawkish, minimalising, utterly moronic, stupid bit of social media tidbit they're trying to throw to us, you know, the sugar to help the Marxist medicine go down.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Paul in Fife, who says, when will the British people and political social commentators wake up to the reality, which is this? Successive governments have engineered the replacement of the indigenous population with foreign cultures and races. It is a deliberate act. I probably shouldn't go on from there, should I? Because I honestly don't know. I love Paul in Fife to bits, and I'm not suggesting the manifestation of certain decisions doesn't look like that. But the idea that anyone sat in a room and gone, yeah, let's replace the British people, is not true. The simple answer, he says, is because governments don't want to. When you add into the mix the insane judgments which prevent these people being deported, you have to believe this is by design. And that bit I do agree with, because it is bonkers. It is absolutely bonkers that somebody could use a bedwetting chicken nugget type defence, despite being a drug dealer and a money launderer, to remain in the country. The answer is no. Here we are trying to solve a prison crisis. Here we are trying to solve a welfare crisis. And I know one doesn't pay for the other, but Paul is absolutely right. I mean, this is bonkers. It's where you do need a Trump-like voice. I don't even think if the Trump-like voice was from Andy Burnham, I don't mind to stand up and say, sorry, this is unacceptable. Peter's in Liverpool. Peter.
The anxiety in teenagers.
Sorry, Peter, say again. I missed the beginning of what you said.
The anxiety teenagers.
Yes, what are you making of this?
Well, it's strange. I left school at I was 15 on my birthday, and I started work that same day, and I couldn't wait to start work.
Yeah.
I was so keen to get on it was a building site and go to work. There doesn't seem to be that enthusiasm. But it was funny, it was strange this morning, when I was doing my walk this morning, I walked past the newsagents and there was 3 pensioners standing outside with paper bags on their shoulders. And I thought, we don't have paper boys anymore. We have paper pensioners. You know...
So they were delivering the paper. Yeah, in fact, the last couple of people round my way that I've seen delivering papers have been older people in cars, actually, you know, stuck aside.
Yeah, these guys were walking, or I think they were on bikes, but it's strange because that was another job that when I was a teenager, it was hard to get because everybody was after them jobs.
God, can you remember how, like, I mean, I did eventually get a paper round, but before I did, the envy I had for the kids that had one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I thought they got their own, they're getting paid. It seemed like a pretty cool thing to do.
It was that incentive. When you picked your money up, you had that money to spend yourself, and it was part of growing up. But you don't seem to have that today. But further on than that is when, later in life, you know, we've had this conversation before about being unemployed under Maggie Thatcher. And you talk about incentives to work. The incentive to work was there because you did not get it. You didn't get benefits like you get today. The incentive was, I've got a mortgage, I've got 2 kids, I've got to get my arse out to work.
Yeah.
And that's the incentive. But you haven't got that pressure. If we're paying teenagers for being off on anxiety, then, you know, I think all we're doing is just encouraging that. We're just encouraging that kind of behaviour.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. We end up with a dependency culture, and it doesn't mean I get it, right? If you're on PIP benefits, very few people are earning a great living out of it, all right? So I understand that. I'm not going down that route of going, yeah, they're all going on holiday to Marbella 3 times a year. I know that's not the case. However, you're able to just about survive, which is preferable to going to work.
Ian, when Maggie Thatcher was in, there was 2 million people unemployed, maybe a bit more than that. But those 2 million, most of those 2 million people were out looking for work, trying to find work. It was hard to get work. And, you know, today, it's just the complete opposite. We may have 10 million on benefits and you know, it just seems a crazy system that there is no pressure put on people to find work.
And that was always part of it, wasn't it? There was a pressure, there was a need, a desire as well, which is also important. Peter, thank you, mate, for that great call to start with on this one. There are 2 obvious questions up and running at different ends of the age scale. How do we fund social care for the elderly, and your experience of that possibly within your own family? And how do we fix the welfare state when it comes to young people getting off anxiety benefits and into the workplace? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. So much to get through here this afternoon. We are, of course, talking about Andy Burnham, Kemi Badenoch in the equation as well. She's demanding the new Prime Minister rules out tax rises to fund social care reform. I've thought about this for years. I don't know how to fund it. All I do know is that somebody has to pay. Simultaneously, the Prime Minister is preparing to crack down on youth sickness benefits after it emerged that teenage anxiety now pays more than many jobs for kids of the same age. What's going on there? Thoughts on that? Also, compulsory voting is reportedly being considered by the Prime Minister's most senior advisers. There is a proposal suggesting a 10 quid fine for anyone who fails to turn up at the ballot box. I'm not sure really what effect that actually has. Is the fine big enough? Do you even need it? Should people be criminalised? Well, quite criminalised, but fined because they don't wish to vote, which is your democratic choice, of course. And an undercover Talk exclusive investigation into Manchester city centre has exposed the grim reality behind Andy Burnham's flagship city, with one reporter offered drugs 4 times in 2 hours and forced to break up a violent street brawl in the area now dubbed as Crackadilly, as opposed to Piccadilly, by the way. We will talk to said reporter in just a second. Details on the way. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Mark in Staffordshire North says to solve the social care problem, we have to sort the NHS first. The NHS employs 1.5 million people. That is 1 in every 46 people living in the UK. Solve the NHS will release enough funds to solve social care. I like it. Another one here, no name given, Ian Collins and death tax. So it sounds like it's a kind of fellow presenter, doesn't it? Death tax, doing drive at 4. Ian Collins and death tax. Suppose a house you are living in is bequeathed to you, but you do not have the funds to pay the tax. You have to sell the house, making yourself homeless, and renting will soon destroy any cash left over. So you're living in that. So if you're, as it stands, if you're living in the house and you're the spouse of somebody who's died, you wouldn't have to sell that house until you die. The person that bequeaths, or the person that receives the house, would then have to pay. So you'd be given a time limit on it, and not until it's sold. And then you would have to pay 10% back to the state to pay for the social care. That's assuming you had social care. Not everybody has social care, but for those that do, it's massively expensive. And one from Mags, who says, have you noticed that Andy Postcode Burnham, every interview he gives is never live? Does he have a thing about journalists asking questions? Methinks that might be the reason. It could be. I mean, the Koonsberg interview, I'll tell you how weird it was. I thought, because Koonsberg does or she used to do a programme on a Sunday morning, and I thought, oh, that's obviously what it was. And because I'd heard some headlines about it or read it in the newspapers on Sunday, I thought I might check out the interview, and I went to look at my TV guide and there was nothing there, and I thought, that's a bit weird. And it was only last night I saw an ad saying it's a panorama special, and they've been kind of drip-feeding clips like it's the greatest event. OK, it's the new Prime Minister, but it's also the state-funded broadcaster. If you record an interview, just play the flipping interview. Stick it on the end of the news. Cancel the local news or whatever you have to do. Cancel the one show, for God's sake. That would be universally popular, wouldn't it? Cancel the one show just for one day and put the Prime Minister's interview on instead. That might work. 0344 499 1000. Now, offered drugs 4 times in 2 hours. I made that statement a couple of moments ago. Forced to break up a brutal street fight himself while onlookers just watched. That's what undercover reporter Christian Drogan found in Manchester's Piccadilly Gardens, an area notorious in this department for some gyp. It's been nicknamed Crackadilly, rough sleeping, tents and shop-fitting protective screens against violent offenders, all part of the deal. Not quite the blueprint that Andy Burnham likes to sell. Let's speak with Christian Drogan, who managed to survive. How you doing, Christian?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
You got out of there. I mean, was it just a bit rough and, you know, not the ideal place you want to take your family, or was this proper carnage?
So Piccadilly used to be a lovely area. You know, the clue's in the name.
Yep.
It used to be lovely gardens. Now, I used to live in Manchester 3 years ago. Up to 3 years ago, I moved out, and it was not as bad as it is now. It is definitely deteriorated, and to be honest, it was actually quite sad. To some of the sites that I saw were quite sad, you know, upsetting. There's a clip that was played earlier today of 2 young girls that I would estimate under the age of 16, and they were having a brutal fight. Now, the clip that was played earlier is only the second fight. The first the first altercation between the two was actually far worse, which was kind of why I I went in all guns blazing to try and put a stop to this, because it was a brutal fight. There might have been young girls, but it was a brutal fight. I was offered drugs by foreign men, Turkish, Palestinian. various sort of foreign-born men, and you know, I mean, there was rats the size of rabbits running around, just open, you know, not even sort of like in the corners, just literally through the middle of the crowds. It was unbelievable.
And this, of course, is the city that our current Prime Minister has been boasting about, how he kind of rejuvenated the place. He turned it from being what you're talking about now to being this kind of paradise and everything's great. I mean, I've been to Manchester more times than I've forgotten. I mean, so many times. And the last time I was in Piccadilly Gardens, probably 5-6 years ago, it was fine. It was absolutely fine, and it looked nice, and you know, restaurants around, you could have a bite to eat, have a little walk, etc. It's clearly changed, and it's changed under Burnham's watch.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Burnham is the mayor of Greater Manchester, not just the city centre. And you know, I mean, there's pockets of Greater Manchester which are just, you know, they've deteriorated. Whether we can put it down just to Andy Burnham or all of it just to Andy Burnham, probably not, but there definitely are some bits that can be put down to Andy Burnham. Obviously, one of the things that he has, or one of the things that he claims is he was going to stop homelessness in Manchester. Well, I spoke to many a homeless person in Manchester on that Tuesday evening, and what I was told by them was actually very interesting. Approximately 2 months ago, there was a big clean-up in the city centre, big movement of all the tent cities that have formed, and you know, when you sort of coincide that with the fact that the Makerfield by-election was just over a month ago, actually it makes you wonder whether they've had a big clean-up in the city centre before the Makerfield election, and then all of a sudden it's literally just gone back to how it was. So I mean, one of the sort of surprising things for me was going into the Tesco with this homeless guy as I was having a chat with him to buy him some coffee and stuff. And you know, I'm going to the Tesco, and I'm sort of thinking, I felt like I was maybe in, you know, a money exchange place or something like that. There was glass screens up in Tesco Express, something that I'd never seen before. And the guy well, I think we've got the clip if we're able to go to it. But yeah, let's have a little look.
I've never been to a Tesco that has glass screens like this.
Oh, it's getting worse.
Really? How bad's it? What's...
Well, we've had people with knives.
Really?
Wear a body camera now.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
We have to, unfortunately.
So have you been threatened with knives before? Really?
Like people spit at us.
Spit at you? Wow.
Why this is here. So it's what, unfortunately, when you come to a big city like this,
yeah.
£10 coins?
Give us £5 and £1 coins, please, yeah.
Okay. Everyone's hard done by, but everyone wants something for free.
Exactly, yeah. Cheers. Nice one. Take care, mate. Right, listen. Don't spend that on anything you shouldn't do, mate.
No,
please don't. Don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty grim, Christian, isn't it? When you've got to walk into a major supermarket with protective screens to protect the staff.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I can sort of inform you that actually in the early hours of today, there was a stabbing in Piccadilly Gardens. There's an investigation ongoing now where that footage was taken, and it's if there's not a fight in Piccadilly Gardens every day among some people, there's a fight nearly every day.
I mean, is the scene, generally speaking, I mean, are you talking about kind of people who are zonked off their face, laying around, sleeping, whatever drug it might happen to be? I mean, is it that kind of feel to it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's people drinking, which I've not got an issue with people drinking in public, but, you know, normally if I was having a drink, sat on a park bench or something, I'd probably go and put my beer cans in the bin. The litter is unbelievable. You know, there's people fast asleep on benches who I don't know what they've taken. You know, the amount of times that people actually sort of got the drugs out and were showing me in broad daylight because there was no police around. So why would they be bothered about you know, getting caught? Because they probably won't be. They probably won't be being caught because there was just no police presence whatsoever.
I wonder. I've often, and this may or may not be the case, Christian, I don't know, but I mean, do the council or the police just go, look, if we have it all in one place, there is bizarrely a level of kind of control about that just by dint of being in one set area. Well, there'll be other.
Well,
is it that, do you think, or can they just not be bothered?
Well, I've spoke to a couple of people who spend quite a lot of time in that area, in Manchester city centre, should I say? And they have told me that, and I don't know how true this is, but it seems like the police decide not to go there unless they really have to, because it's just a right load of sort of work added onto their workload if they do go in there.
Yeah.
Which is obviously...
for no discernible, I mean, if you're picking up crack addicts and the like, nothing really comes of that. You're not solving what is concealed. You're not solving a murder. You're not solving an armed robbery or a serial killer. And I suppose it's seen as sort of low-hanging fruit in some respects. I should mention, Christian, before you go, you're actually, you're never not on it when it comes to a job or two in areas that are either controversial or, in case of Manchester, sometimes a bit risky. And right now you're on your way to the next one. You're making your way to Calais, is that right? I can only guess.
Yeah, so I'm heading down south. Well, I'm actually just pulled off the M11. That's why I'm in the car right now. And I don't know the exact figures, but I know it's well over 1,000 since Andy Burnham took office. So, but he's not spoke about it since he's took office, since he's become Prime Minister. So, let's go down, see what's happening, and have let's just have a refresh, really, and see if he decides to talk about it, because I'm sure there will be plenty of chaos going on the other side of the
I'm sure there is. Well, I think there was there a boat at the weekend that was the size of a double-decker or something? And I think I
believe it was 165 people on the boat.
I've never seen a boat like that, or a ferry, or a dinghy like that. I mean, it sounds more like a cross-channel ferry than anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think somebody did get arrested for people trafficking. Some teenager apparently was driving the boat, or whatever the term is. Listen, Christian, good luck with that one. Let's speak after you've been there as well and see what comes of that. Christian Drogan from Watchman UK. There he was, Piccadilly Gardens in Manchester. If you know this area well, it does put paid to the frankly absurd claim from Andy Burnham that he kind of solved homelessness in Manchester, when he didn't. It went down a little bit. These things often happen anyway. Went down a little bit and then went back up again. In the same way that if you take down in London, Marble Arch, there are some sort of similarities here, which was a big tented community of completely undesirable people that nobody wanted in the country. Thieves and vagrants and, just horrendous criminality of all manner. Plus the visuals. It's Marble Arch, for God's sake. Bit of history here. Piccadilly Gardens, bit of history there. We don't want places like this wrecked in this sense. And then it disappeared for a bit, the Marble Arch problem. And Sadiq Khan was, going around the place, much like Burnham, claiming, oh, yeah, fantastic, solved the problem. Now it's back. It's back again. And the same thing happened with Burnham. It went down for a little bit. This is rough sleeping. And now it's increased again. What's the problem with the police going in there saying, right, everybody, you've got 1 hour to leave this place, otherwise you're all going to be nicked. And I think the short answer to that is, well, if you nick us all, what are you then going to do with us all? And what is our specific offence? What, being drunk? Being asleep in a park? And there's the problem. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Paul in Manchester. Paul, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Great show as usual.
Thank you. Just before you talk about kids working, just talk to me about Manchester. And, Andy, you've got a new mayor coming soon. What's your assessment of the last one, based on what we've just heard?
Sorry, Ian, it's disgusting, mate. I went to, in Manchester, I was at a concert actually on a Saturday night, and walking back from the concert like 11:30 at night to get the tram back to where I live at Victoria, it was just beggars, alcoholics, people that use drugs. They even fenced Piccadilly Gardens off it with that bad, mate.
Wow. So as not to offend the residents of Piccadilly Gardens.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do, Tom. No. But going back to my question about people not working.
Yeah, what's going on there?
You've got to blame the parents, mate. I mean, They let them stay on the PlayStations or Xboxes till like 2, 3 in the morning. They don't want to work. I mean, when I was 14 years old in 1978, Ian, I had 2 paper jobs and I got £1 each. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I walked to my local news agents. It didn't open till 6. It was in the back of the shop, like the names and addresses of the paper that was being delivered in the top right-hand corner, and he'd give me a list of where they were being delivered. And I'd do that, it took me 45 minutes for that round. Then I'd go back to the shop, it'd give me another Manchester Evening News bag, which was bloody heavy, Ian, to be fair, at 14-year-old. Then I did another 45 minutes. Then when I went back to the shop, he'd give me £2 for the week. I'd go home then, Ian, at 14-year-old, at 7 o'clock. I had school at 9.
Yeah.
I mean, I was tired.
I know, but what a great moment when you got that couple of quid, right? I mean, and you thought, you know, I've done that.
Oh, it was brilliant, mate.
I've earned that money.
My first job was at the shopping giant in Failsworth, in Manchester. I was 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I was on £1 an hour for 40 hours. We got Tuesday off, but I had to work Saturday for £40 a week, mate, stacking shelves. You know,
fantastic. I did it in Iceland myself. I know exactly what you mean. But I couldn't. It took me ages to get my head around the fact that I somehow had some independence. You know, going into town and buying a pair of jeans, having just been paid myself, felt like the most... I can remember the day of doing that and thinking, God, up to this point, my mum bought me the jeans. And here was on my Todd, just buying... I think I had some money for some shoes as well, some really nice, like, little suede numbers. They were beautiful. Listen, great call, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for that. Has that been lost? Is that not even in the appetite of a younger person? Clearly not every younger person, because there's going to be loads of you listening going, well, actually, my kids are really diligent, they're hard-working, they want to work, they want to earn their own money, they've done brilliantly, they found it themselves. Look, we've got many more of kids like that in our society, but we do have a very expensive cohort that are in a very different place. How do we address that? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Intention to run for a 4th term as President of the United States. I won 3 times, did very well the 2nd time, by the way. It's a rigged election, but we don't have to talk about it.
It's an entire community in their heads, and he knows how to push it and literally send them off. I thought he was actually more restrained last night than we've seen in just his regular speeches. I mean, he's got comedic timing. He is the funniest president we've ever had, and man, he was playing it on all fours last night.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Nick in London says, good job by Watchmen. Those protective screens are pretty much the norm in East London. I wonder if it's the price we pay for being saddled with a Labour mayor. Maybe I'm getting cynical. Not. That's the kind of thing that, I don't know, you know when you watch, have you ever watched Breaking Bad, you know, and there's a couple of scenes that are filmed in, I don't know, Mexico or something, and they go to a sort of 7-Eleven at night, and it looks like that. You think that shouldn't be the 21st century in the UK. When the artist Lowry, but famous for painting Matchstick Men, which now looks like a kind of comment on crack addicts, more than it looks like anything else. He was prophetic, was our Larry. George is in Dundee. What's happening, George? Good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
Hi, it's regarding the welfare state.
Yes.
Now, I've got a wee bit of experience of filling in this form. As I've said to you in the past, my wife gets the equivalent of PIP, you know, in Scotland, adult disability. Now, I don't know if you've ever filled in these forms, Ian, but they're absolutely horrendous, right? And instead of it being 2 points for this, 4 points for this, 2 points for this, 6 points for this, whatever, the government should sit down with the health services and say, these are the illnesses and conditions we are covering. If you are blind, you get PIP. If you are an amputee, you get PIP. If you've got motor neuron disease, you get PIP. If you've got uncontrolled epilepsy, you get PIP.
Yeah.
Because I swear to God, Ian, right, people getting things for bedwetting, eczema, headaches, these aren't disabilities. These are...
Correct.
I can't get the word... disabling, but they're not a disability.
Sure.
I've looked at these forms, right, yeah, and I reckon if I filled in one myself and spun a wee tail here and there, I could get it with a wee bit of arthritis. I get a migraine now and again. I've got high blood pressure. I'm a wee bit deaf. I could probably qualify for one of the lower rates. I am no way disabled. I am no way disabled.
If you throw in being a Dundee United supporter, then they'll double it.
Oh, my God, Ian. My God. Wash your mouth out, man. Wash your mouth. I'm for Dundee. Support Dundee.
You do?
I've not got 6 fingers and 6 toes. I can support them.
Love it.
You hate to come for East Angus to support Dundee United.
Well, listen, whichever way you go, whichever way you go.
Can I say one other
I just love the idea of the conversation when you're down there at the office going, yeah, and a Dundee United supporter.
Oh,
Ka-ching! There you go.
There's
an extra few quid.
One other thing, Ian,
Yes.
on the old age pension and old age pension for everybody should never be means tested, and this should be protected for everybody going forward. And every government should make the commitment of saying, we are never going to means test the old age pension. The triple walk could go, but we are never going to means test the old age pension. Everybody deserves a state pension because everybody has paid for the previous generation. So everybody deserves that.
There it is. Great call. George, thank you, mate, for that cracking call from George in Dundee. Where do we go with that? 0344 499 1000. I do wonder whether the government just relaxed about this. Is it easier to pay it than to not pay? Is it that simple? Just give the money. And it's worth having a look, and I'm going to have another look at the specifics where Elon Musk, in that interview that I referenced in the last hour, he doesn't talk about this, but he talks about the kind of world we're going to live in very, very soon. I can't quite recall the timeline he put on it, but it was really very soon. As to when we'll live in a world of abundance and the government should just give people paychecks. Now, of course, economically, that doesn't quite work. But is that the kind of world we're going to live in? I think Musk, he divides the room and stuff, but he would know more about that with his AI endeavours and all manner of, Neuralink, SpaceLink, Starlink, God knows how many links this fella's got. That would be an area that he would be, I'd say, more au fait with. Is that what government's just working to the kind of universal basic credit principle in all but name? Janet is in North Wales. What have you got, Janet? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
It's lovely to speak to you. I used to stalk Peter Cardwell, but he's disappeared.
Well, he's still here.
I know, but he's not on a programme that I can watch. But listen, I was.
What are you doing at 7 o'clock in the evening, Janet? Do tell. Come on.
No, but I work as a carer.
Oh, I think you had catching up with Emmerdale or something. You know, I didn't.
No.
Could be that.
Emmerdale, really. Ian.
Sorry, so I do apologise. What have you got for us?
I was calling about the voting thing. I kind of want everybody to be made to vote. But I think it's really important that we educate people about politics.
Yeah.
And it's really scary, though, because if you put it in the hands of the schools, what are they going to be teaching people? But you and I both know adults that go, the government can pay for that.
Yeah.
And they don't understand where that money is coming from.
Correct.
And that is something really important.
Well, they don't understand, they don't care either. That's the problem.
Well,
it's a sort of complete divorce.
Children. I've got grandchildren, and we've had conversations. And my grandson's got ADHD, and he gets really involved in all kinds of stuff. And I started to explain to him, well, the government get money from you, from me. I work and they take money, and he was like kind of gobsmacked about that. That's the kind of stuff we need to be teaching our children. And only when they understand all that kind of stuff will they vote properly. Will they engage with the political system?
But are we living in a kind of and I'm not making any excuses here, I'm just kind of trying to wonder what's happened. A sort of lethargic malaise that is underpinning the existence of some young people, where they can't, in their world, I mean, they've got loads of opportunities out there, and yes, there is a cost of living issue and life's pretty darn expensive, but every week in this country, mortgages are signed off, people are hired for jobs in all pay grades. So it's not as if nothing's going on, but there seems to be a cohort of people who can't see. I don't even think they're sitting there going, I can't be asked to go to work, mate. I don't even think it's that. I mean, there's always that contingent that live among us, but there seems to be a group that life just seems a challenge too far.
Ian, I think we have had it too good for too long.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think we've lived in this kind of bubble where everything is absolutely wonderful and the state will look after you. And, you know, we don't live in countries where there are wars. We don't have, you know, we've had it too good for too long. And our children, and you must do it as well, you want to give your children more than you've ever had. So we spoil them. Yeah. And we've now got this. I don't know. It's kind of scary where we are right now.
It is scary. Janet, listen, thank you for that. Really nice to talk, and thanks for your nice comments. And Peter Cardwell is back on at 7 o'clock this evening, by the way, if you are around. That is Janet in North Wales. Explain to me if you are the parent of one such child. And I'm not talking about a kid that's a lazy such and such, in the conventional sense. They've either lost their way, can't find their way, everything looks too daunting, everything looks unworthwhile, everything looks too expensive. And yes, in their world, they feel anxious and they feel a bit, they will use the word depressed, they'll talk about their mental health issues. Whatever you want to call it, it's to mobilise your kid has become almost impossible. If you're that parent, I'd love to hear what your assessment of your own kid is in this respect. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Now, police forces have spent over £630 million, you heard that correctly, on anti-racist policies since 2020. Not since 1820, since 2020. That's enough for 2,000 more police officers. Researchers claim most of these policies focused almost entirely on black communities, creating a hierarchy of ethnicities. Let's speak with David Spencer, who's a former Detective Chief Inspector for the Met, now Head of Crime and Justice at Policy Exchange, the leading UK think tank. It is one of those stories, David, and good afternoon to you, by the way. One of those stories you read and think, I must have got these numbers wrong. I'll read it again. And then you read it again and go, nope, I got it absolutely right. What is going on?
Well, it's astonishing, isn't it? I think what's remarkable is this is our low estimate. This is the least that we think is being spent. Much more. So it is pretty remarkable. What we found was that 2020 Chief Constable's Council, which is a sort of secretive kind of backroom policy-making body that chief constables are all part of, essentially came up with what's called the Police Race Action Plan over a period of time. And that was in response to the murder of George Floyd.
In fact, David, do me a favour, just stay there 1 second. We're going to try and get you back on a slightly better line. The line just seems to be giving up at different parts, which is making it very difficult to hear. I know the very wise words you have to tell us. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Let me just read a couple of messages from you while we do. Deborah's in Lee, who says, I've worked in Manchester city centre for the past 30 years. Piccadilly Gardens used to be a beautiful place until they ripped up all the flower beds and benches and replaced them with a concrete jungle. I would not venture anywhere near there now, either during the day and especially at night. Drug dealers, spice addicts and illegal migrants have taken the place over. Andy Burnham has not improved anything. We keep hearing this, and Deborah, thank you for that. This is not Deborah's opinion. It's not Dave's opinion, our previous communicator. These are facts, all right? Go there yourself. Well, I wouldn't advise you go there. Probably too dangerous. But have a look yourself, because this is there for all to see. That's not OK. And if you were the mayor of a city, for those that don't know Piccadilly Gardens, it's a well-known area that you might have previously seeked out to have a look at and relax and enjoy, as Deborah says, the flower beds and the benches and the like. It is no longer that place. And that's a tragedy. This one comes in, no name given. So, as usual, those who spend all their money or spend their life on welfare get to pay nothing. The problem is the top of the 40% inheritance tax is taking the proverbial out of the hard workers and savers, giving all others a free ride. And that is true. That is absolutely true. So even if you went with, well, it's not my idea of a 10% tax that you would take from the... So you earmark 10% from the sale of a house or the savings in a bank of somebody who's died. And that goes towards... And that, by the way, if they'd been in social care, it's probably not going to touch the sides anyway. Is that our only option? I'm not advocating it. I'm wondering, in the absence of literally anything else, because remember, with all of these initiatives, someone has to pay. David Spencer is back with us, former Detective Chief Inspector with the Met and now Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. David, we've got you back on a better line. You were just explaining how this initiative, or how the police ended up spending 630 million quid on anti-racist policies just in the last 5 or 6 years.
That's right. Well, after the murder of George Floyd in the United States in 2020, a murder that happened several thousand miles away, chief constables used what's called the Chief Constable's Council, which is a sort of backroom policy-making body for making policies up themselves without going to Parliament or ministers, and that's where they came up with the idea for the Police Race Action Plan. What's really interesting is that it wasn't every chief constable that was in favour of this sort of radical direction. It was actually, according to a whistleblower that we've spoken to, who's quite senior in policing, they said that it's mainly the southern chief constables and Welsh chief constables that have gone down this route, and actually the northern chief constables were much more sceptical about it all. So there's certainly been some dissent amongst chief constables over years about the sort of money that's being spent.
I mean, just a couple of points on that. You've already answered pretty much one of them. I mean, this was a killing that happened in another country, thousands of miles away. But I don't know how well the chief constables concerned looked at this story, because as awful as it is when someone is killed and the perpetrator is a police officer, this wasn't actually a racist murder. The man wasn't tried in any race aspect of it. It was transposed as that through protest, but criminally and legally speaking, he was responsible for his death, but it wasn't racist.
And ultimately, the context in the United Kingdom is vastly different to the United States. It's very, very easy for people to think that, you know, that we're living in the sort of same context, but it's actually very, very different. And I think one of the things which seems to have been imported to the UK from the US is this concept of anti-racism. And the real problem with that concept when it comes to policing is that it requires an active mindset and approach against racism. Now, that sounds on the surface to be entirely reasonable. We're all against racism after all. But for a police officer who needs to be impartial and an open-minded investigator, they need to start from the perspective, a sort of neutral perspective. Yeah. And this anti-racism concept actually requires police officers to do something different. And that's one of the real problems with the policy making that's gone on through Chief Constables Council over the last 6 years.
Indeed, and you know, we've seen some fairly high-profile cases recently, and although some of the investigation into things like Henry Novak are yet to fully ascertain what happened, but there is, you know, a suspicion that in similar cases, let's put it like that, officers have attended and their instincts have been thrown out of the window, and they've rather than doing some good policing, they've gone by a new rule book that was written by some of these chiefs.
That's right. And the reality is that, you know, on-the-ground police officers who are, you know, hard-working, often courageous officers, doing the best they can in the middle of the night, have, rather than being taught to focus on acting without fear or favour or treating everyone the same, have been bathed in days and hours and weeks sometimes of this sort of training, which focuses on this sort of anti-racism ideology rather than focusing on policing without fear or favour and treating everybody as equal before the law. And that's the real problem.
How do we solve this? Because, I mean, it would seem logical that, I don't know, a Home Secretary would just come along and say, all this old nonsense you've been up to, forget everything that somebody told you 6 years ago. We're in different territory now. I know that you work also in the sort of recruitment and development side as well. You feel very passionate about this. Is it new leaders that we need? What's the deal?
Well, certainly we think the Home Secretary should be involved, and the report that Policy Exchange has put out this morning, one of our recommendations is a Police Impartiality Act, whereby an Act of Parliament which makes it very, very clear to everyone, all of us as sort of citizens in this great country, but also in particular to chief constables and police officers, that they must act in an impartial way without fear or favour. And that would cover every aspect of policing. And that is what's required. It requires a change in the law. And it is that level of change that's required if we're to see sort of the last 6 years being rolled back on, and that's what's required. So it does require government and ministerial intervention to get policing back on the right track.
And is it also down to the kind of people we recruit? Is that it? You know, there's been some would argue, a disproportionate emphasis over the years on graduates, those that have gone to university, joining the police. Now, nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to go to university and become a copper. That's fantastic if you can do the two. But a sense that just by dint of going to university has somehow increased your chances and made you a better potential police officer. Is it areas such as that need looking at?
Well, the most important thing when it comes to the recruitment and assessment of police officers is they are assessed and recruited based on merit. They need to be up up for the job and able to do the job, and that is more important than anything else. You know, I was a police officer for quite a while, and you know, I met some police officers who'd never been anywhere near university and were brilliant police officers. I also met individuals who had been to university and that were not up to the job at all. So, you know, whether you've been to university or not is not necessarily the deciding criteria, but what needs to be there is an assessment against merit. That's the really important thing.
Listen, on that point, David, great to have you on with us. Thank you very much indeed. David Spencer, former Detective Chief Inspector. He's author of that report. I mean, it is rather extraordinary, the explosion. I mean, the George Floyd thing, you know, grim as it was the bizarre international knock-on effect was so darn weird when you had suddenly thousands of people taken to the streets in this country, a crime that happened across the other side of the world, but almost claiming that it was, you know, we're living in sort of 1978 or something, that this was Johannesburg in the 80s, or the deep south of the Mississippi in the 60s. I mean, it was just bizarre to see all these people with who'd experienced none of this stuff, but sort of almost claiming that they had. Seamus says, are you completely out of touch? The poor lady is a carer. Maybe she needs the money. Maybe she needs to look after her family. What an insulting comment, thinking she's watching TV. I don't even know what that's referring to. Oh, was it the Peter Cardwell comment? Oh, because she said she's a big Peter Cardwell fan. And I said, he's still on. And she said, I'm busy at 7. I said, what are you doing, watching Emmerdale? And she said, no, I'm a carer. OK. I'm sure Seamus is being... Are we that sensitive, Seamus? Seriously, Petal? Come on. I think he's having a laugh. Morgan's in Cheshire. Morgan, how you doing?
Yes, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Tell us about the sort of younger generation. You're 27, as I understand it, so you're kind of slightly out of the initial cohort, but you're still in the ballpark.
Yeah, I sort of feel like I fell into a sort of area where just coming out of university, there was still good enough opportunities for people coming out of education, and it wasn't that difficult to find a job. But I do have a lot of sympathy for those coming out of secondary education, A-levels, university, with the situation that they find themselves in. You hear many stories from some younger people that I know about how they apply for hundreds of jobs, can't seem to even get to the interview stage with a lot of them. And I'm not saying that, you know, university guarantees you a job or anything like that, and hard work is obviously the more important thing, but I just wanted to sort of dispel the narrative of that, you know, there is no incentive for younger people to work. You know, people can rise up the ladder very quickly, but at the same time, they need to be given that opportunity to be able to show that. A lot of jobs now want you to have 2 or 3 years of work experience.
That's true.
Without even giving the opportunity to do so.
I agree. I've been at pains throughout this, as you, I hope, noticed, Morgan, to say that I don't think this is bone idleness. I think it's a mindset among some, and clearly not all. You can't say anyone that's just come out of university suddenly becomes an anxiety-ridden dodgepot who lays at home all day in a hammock in the back room. Obviously, that isn't the case. I think something else is going on.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree that, you know, the idea that people's mental health, when they look at sort of the idea of, you know, the ways that salaries look, and you were talking earlier about, you know, the benefits that people can be on from not working, you know, there is definitely that gap has closed, hasn't it, between what the salaries are at the start versus what the benefits packages you can get from, you know, like the guy said earlier, signing the sheet in the right way. And maybe it's a case of, you know, those benefits levels lowering, but also at the same time that giving different pathways that aren't just university. You know, the degree apprenticeship route was something that was spoken about a lot in government a few years ago, but doesn't really seem to have kicked off as much. And that would be a great opportunity for people to get work experience while continuing education.
Andy Burnham is talking about this Dutch model where you kind of hybrid it and get people into work or people into voluntary work if they're not doing anything. What are your thoughts on that briefly?
Yeah, I think that would work, but I would say it's potentially a slippery slope towards the idea of American internships, where people are not getting paid for the work that they're carrying out. I think it's a very good idea to do volunteer work, but I think there's a lot of sort of Americanisms coming into sort of UK spheres, and I would actively try to avoid some of those if we could. And you see that in politics as well. This Americanism of the left and the right is very similar to what America does now in just Democrat, Republican. And you kind of want to have a multi-party system to keep the discourse going and not have the left versus the right, and that these ideas can't cross and people can come to agreement on the things.
I get it. Morgan, thank you. Great call. Thank you, sir, for that. Really appreciate it. Morgan in Cheshire. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
We're not supposed to flip and flop with every spirit of the age, every woke ideology or every passing fad and trend that comes about. We are supposed to be called out and separate, and the scriptures upon which the foundations and the continuing faith is based is a blueprint for that formation and the continuation of the church as a living entity in society. We are supposed to be a part of the society, acting as the moral voice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. You can voice notice on that number as well, because that way you sort of jump the queue a little bit. We'll talk to Dan in just a second. Before we do, it's the Voice of Doom, Day 2. Voice of Doom, I have to keep saying this for the uninitiated, it's a mystery voice, but it's political. So you are looking for a politician or somebody obviously connected to the world of politics, young, old, dead, alive, left-wing or right-wing. Simple question, who is this?
The men and the women fight.
Let's hear that again.
The men and the women fight.
I don't know why that sounds funny every time I hear it. The more I hear it. And again?
The men and the women fight.
The men and the women fight. But who is it? 87222 if you think you know who it is. If somebody gets it correct, obviously we'll tell you who it is in the next hour. If nobody gets it correct, it rolls over to tomorrow. Here it is again.
The men and the women fight.
And again.
The men and the women fight.
But not again. 87222. 87222. Hopefully somebody gets it correct. They've been going quite at a rapid rate of knots because Finn, our producer, has been picking really easy ones lately. He's been responsible for all of them. All of them. And they get one in 1 or 2 days. Oh, my life, you nearly took my heart out then in my ear. He says this is the first one he's done. Yeah, right. Find out after the news if anybody's got it correct. Let's go to Dan in Portsmouth. How you doing, Dan?
Yeah, good, great show, thank you.
Thank you.
I was ringing regarding the girl, or the story about making it compulsory to vote. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, it'd be a great idea if the education hasn't been infiltrated by left-wing activists.
Well, that's a good point, yeah, because at that age, I mean, at 16, I mean, even if you haven't been infiltrated, which plenty have, you're bang on there, Dad. But even if you haven't, I think, you know, instinctively, you're 16, for God's sake. You're not even allowed really on social media, but
no, this is it. So
you're allowed to vote.
You there. So I've got you on side for a minute. I might have you on side for another 30 seconds or so. So then I'll raise it to 21 minimum.
Yeah.
That's my most sensible option.
Yeah,
then I start to get a little bit more out of the box really. And I would say, why on earth have everyone got the same vote? Why on earth why should everyone get the right to vote? If you're not paying into society, if you're not contributing, if you've never paid a penny in tax, if you've done nothing but get arrested and get locked up, if you're nothing but a hindrance to society, how are you even allowed to vote? And if you are allowed to vote, how's your vote worth the same as somebody who's done nothing but contribute and do good work for society and is worth? I'd go along the lines of the Roman Empire, where becoming a citizen was a difficult thing, and it was a sought after thing, and give those people the right to shape our future. I certainly wouldn't make it easier.
The only trouble with that, I tend to agree with you, but and also there's all these bonkers people that think prisoners should get the vote, which is just some kind of weird laugh, right? But anyway, putting that aside, how do you work out, and what system do you put in place to work out who is entitled, who's not? Because would you have to be out of work for a long period of time? What's the deal?
Well, really, in an honest world, you wouldn't. It's impossible. But it's an argument against giving everyone the vote. But I think there would be ways of implementing it. I think if you haven't paid a certain amount of income tax in your life, then no vote. You haven't paid any tax. You've never done anything. Why do you deserve it? So, as soon as you get over a threshold, then you earn. Good news. Guess what? You've just beaten the threshold. You have now got a right to vote. It should be a prize. For me, giving idiots the vote is madness.
It is madness. So you can't vote till you're 21. Agree with that. I'd also add you shouldn't be able to be an MP until you're 28, or a police officer till you're 28. But you know, we could go on with that one. But we sound like a couple of old gits, but I love it. Dan, thank you, mate, for that. Dan in Portsmouth. Let's go to Kevin, who is also in Portsmouth. Kevin, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Ian.
You don't live next door to Dan, do you?
I well do. I don't know. No, I'm not next door to him. Okay. I know my neighbours. But,
all right, that's good.
Anyway.
Could be in a basement somewhere, I don't know.
We spoke a few weeks ago about the illegal problem, and you rather like what I had to say. So I now have another solution for the unemployment problem, particularly those who say they got ADHD. Now, one of the things I do is teach scuba diving, and I had a kid come in, and he's coming from the local college, and he had a tutor with him, and he had to fill in his name and address on a folder.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to his tutor, "Chris, come and fill this in." What? You don't talk to your tutor like you ask if he can fill it in. This kid was 17. He couldn't write his name and address down.
Wow.
So I said, "Well, what's going on?" And he said, no. So I got ADHD. I said, "Oh, gosh, that sounds terrible. What is it?" "I don't know. I just got it."
Right.
Okay. Right. Let's
self-diagnosed, is that?
No. Somebody would have given him that. He's far too stupid to work it out for himself. Somebody would have said you've got ADHD, therefore you can't do this, that, and the other. So the answer is, well, I'm sorry, if you can't fill in your name and address, you can't do the studying to become even a recreational diver, because it is technical and complicated. So you might as well go home now. He said, funnily enough, he suddenly learned to read and write.
That's bizarre, isn't it? So he'd kind of, it's almost, it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the reason, the real reason that's just to say, I just got it in it.
Yeah.
He didn't know what the hell it was. Somebody said you got it, so okay, fine. Is that an excuse for doing nothing? Yes, brilliant.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be, whilst, there are people who do have clearly reading and writing issues, that is not, he didn't.
Well, that's dyslexia. That doesn't stop you from getting a job.
Correct.
But on the other hand, that probably would impede you from getting a job in your business where you do have to be able to write quickly and accurately.
Well, I mean, plenty of people are dyslexic in this business. The late James Well was dyslexic, and, you know, he did struggle, you know, at the beginning of his career for lots of reasons, because nobody knew what the hell that was. They just wrote you off as someone who, you know, was either inattentive,
Or sick.
Or yeah, exactly. That was it. So you were just sort of shoved to the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, but, well, you know, good for the late James, because he got to the top of the pile.
Yeah, he did.
But no, the reason I actually originally called up was my solution for unemployed youth. Very simple. You've got 6 months to find a job. If you haven't found a job within 6 months, you're going to be drafted into the army.
Yeah.
We need more troops. And immediately, we can't afford it, you know, the military budget. Well, hang on a minute. You've got a soaring welfare budget. Take them off welfare, put them on a salary. It might cost you a little bit more. It's not going to cost you a massive amount more. And we suddenly get a halfway meaningful army, and these people have got some purpose in life.
And you've got a return on your investment, whereas at the moment we have none whatsoever. Listen, Kevin, I'm going to run because the news is upon us. Thank you very much indeed. Love it. Thank you, Kevin in Portsmouth. Great call again, 0344 499 1000. Voice of Doom, here's the voice.
The men and the women fight.
If you think you know who that is, 87222.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back. It is sad that Bill Oddie has died, but somebody that's not being talked about is Zippy from Rainbow has also died. Did you know that? And Finn, our producer, and probably Amy as well, who's only a little older, are going, who the hell is Zippy from Rainbow? Look it up, kids, but it's a moment for 30 seconds silence. I kid you not. What have we got this up? We're talking about Andy Burnham, we're talking about Kemi Badenoch. She's demanding that Andy Burnham rules out tax rises to fund social care, because that's back on the agenda. Why would it not be? Nobody's solved it. They've all given it a go. It's always been rejected, but ultimately somebody has to pay. Who pays? How do we do it? It's a conundrum. How do we do it? Because this is at a crisis point. And as Burnham himself said, and he's right about this, the entire health service is going to collapse if we don't solve the problem. We're also talking about compulsory voting. Apparently, the Prime Minister's most senior advisors are thinking about this. There are proposals suggesting a £10 fine for anyone who fails to turn up at the ballot box. Will that work? Sort of works in Australia. It's kind of created a national habit, I suppose. I don't think it's the fine that makes people vote. But of course, you can't force people, and why would you want to in a democracy? And we've been talking also about the Undercover Talk exclusive investigation into Manchester city centre, which has exposed a grim reality behind Andy Burnham's flagship city with a reporter. Offered drugs 4 times in 2 hours and forced to break up a violent street brawl in the area that's now been dubbed Crackadilly. Should have been Piccadilly, of course. What has gone on there? This is the city, of course, and the area that Andy Burnham says, no, I solved that one. I solved it. Everything's tickety-boo over there. It clearly is not. Your thoughts on that and all the breaking news as well, 0344 499 1000. Keith in Lincolnshire says, bring back national service. It taught them teamwork and self-sufficiency and a pride in your country and yourself. It needs... Did anybody ever try this? Where you could have a national service, but it wouldn't be a military national service. Because in many respects, the last thing the military want are people that really don't want to be there, I suppose. But this Dutch scheme talks about voluntary work. So if you're not in training, education or employment, then the voluntary sector is often seen as a really actually very helpful and effective way of getting people back into a mindset. I say back into it, some of these people never actually worked. Something of that nature, could that be compulsory? I wonder if that's what Burnham is kind of talking about. Thank you, Keith, for that. More on the way. Now, let's go back to Ed Miliband. He says development and climate must sit at the heart of British foreign policy. So he's lost the job as being in charge of climate, but he's managed to reintroduce it in his new job, which is being in charge of the Foreign Office. Meanwhile, back home, a glut of wind farm power has added nearly £1 billion to household energy bills. Funny how the green agenda he champions abroad keeps costing us over here. Maurice Cousins is campaign director at Net Zero Watch. Good afternoon to you, Maurice. Nice to have you with us. I mean, it was always a matter of time, wasn't it, before Ed couldn't leave it alone, and he's only been in the job 20 minutes, and he's almost back in the old one again.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I'd feared for quite a while, actually, when there were rumours that he was going to get the Foreign Office job and that he would essentially try to reorient the priorities of the Foreign Office around climate. And yeah, I think that's sort of where he's taking us. Yeah.
So climate and development are intrinsically linked, seems to be his issue. And we keep, hearing more and more of people talking about, in fact, I even heard somebody say it in my neck of the woods, talking about channel migration. And they said, these people are escaping a climate emergency. And I said, where did you get that from? There's literally no evidence. Even those that want to throw all manner of assistance to illegal immigrants aren't making that argument, but that seems to be one that's developing more and more.
But look, I don't have an issue per se with international aid or development. I think that those can make sense and serve some of our strategic needs when done properly. The issue I think I have with Ed Miliband doing this is I don't really have any confidence that the governance of any of this will be done properly. There were some reports that came out, I don't know if you remember last year, where there were international climate budgets where he had control over them, where actually it was found that funds were being misallocated or were going on projects that were not very effective or considered to be pointless. So, for example, there was money that was going towards a road to nowhere, I think somewhere in South America or somewhere like that. £52 million was being spent on things. You had money that was being spent on things like condoms to be distributed to people in the Congo. It's quite hard to see sometimes how there's any sort of real governance over some of these project. So that's my problem. The other problem, of course, I have with a lot of this is that, we've got real spending constraints in this country. Debt to GDP is currently at around close to about 100%. It's at its highest level now since about 2007. We're borrowing money just to service the debt. Is this really a good use of our resources? I think we've probably got other things that we should be focused on closer to home.
Maybe more wind farms. Do you think that's the answer? Talk us through this, Maurice. What on earth is going on, and why is £1 billion being added to energy bills?
Well, really, what it comes down to is that wind is inherently very difficult to manage. Yeah. And yes, when the wind is blowing, there's energy there's power that's being produced. But to make that power useful, you need to have infrastructure to be able to get it to where it's needed. And if you don't have enough of that infrastructure to be able to do it, there is a capacity crunch. And if you don't switch off the turbines, then the system can overload. And it's those payments which are paid to the generators are called constraint payments. And because we've built lots and lots of wind turbines in the last few years, we have an oversupply, if you like, of a lot of that generating capacity, and we don't have enough infrastructure in place to absorb it. But that infrastructure itself isn't very cheap. Isn't very cheap either. So you're on the horns of a dilemma. You either have to build lots of infrastructure to be able to make the power, to make the energy useful, or you have to pay constraint payments in order for you to not just overload the grid, and that's basically what's happened. Don't know what happened there.
Are we? Sorry, Finn's left his phone on. Is it possible? Is there ever going to be a point when we can say, OK, look, we've got the windmills, we've got it sorted now. It's free power, jobs are good, and we haven't got to compensate anybody because of that they didn't turn enough. We've managed to find ways to store it, so that works brilliantly. Is that day near? Is it completely impossible?
No, we're nowhere near from getting to that. That would be utopian thinking. We're in that physically. That would be almost impossible to do. There are no batteries that can store the amount of power that's needed for at a grid scale to meet shortages of supply when the wind and the sun are not blowing. And a lot of this infrastructure is very, very expensive. So being able to pay all of that back is going to take some time, and then it's going to need replacing at some point. So you have to do some of it again. It's unfortunately, there is no such thing as a free lunch, and that's what it.
So it is I know these are old cliches, but is the whole wind farm thing the sort of Betamax of the clean energy world?
Well, there is a risk of that, I suppose, of where we are picking winners, and choosing one. I mean, look, just to be clear, I am not saying that there should be absolutely no wind or solar on our grid. That is not what I'm saying. It's just a question of balance. Mm-hmm. I think that what I know he's no longer there, but what Ed Miliband was trying to do when he was Energy Secretary, and his successor is also trying to do, is that they're trying to make our grid renewables dominant, and I think that balance is not in the right direction, and it's making us more reliant on the weather and on countries like China.
Yeah, indeed. Look, and also just a final point, Maurice. I don't know anybody who wouldn't prefer cleaner, more efficient, cheaper energy. Of course, we all would. But as I think you're alluding to there, to be evangelical about it in the way that Ed Miliband has, where he wants to see only wind and solar running the place, is, to put it politely, is merely a dream.
Yeah, you need a diverse mix, but at the base, what you need are dense supplies of power that are that are reliable and can meet demand when needed. And we had the answers for that in the early 2000s, and we've just basically spent the last 2 decades dismantling that system, and it's reflected in our energy bills. So no one's going to deny to you that price shocks caused by wars in Iran and Ukraine haven't had a role to play. Of course they have, but we've been left more exposed, and we're creating a structurally more expensive energy system through the policy choices that we've been choosing.
Indeed. Maurice, thank you for your time. Really good to see you. Thank you, Maurice Cousins, Campaign Director at Net Zero Watch. Comments coming in from you on a number of things like voting. Steve in Rushden says, regarding voting, why not change the system so that if you don't go and vote, your vote is counted towards the incumbent? Because you're obviously happy with how things are. Therefore, if you're not happy and want to change things, you have to get yourself off your backside and go and vote for that change. I suppose the only problem with that, I mean, I love that it's quite a seductive dilemma to be put in, but what if you're not happy with anyone? What if you think all parties are rubbish and they don't represent you? So I think, you know, the none of the above thing, I don't know what purpose it really serves other than you would get people to just say it because that's what the thing to say is. Oh, I'm going to do none of the above. What do you reckon, Mick? Yeah, I'll give that a go too. As if there's something quite cool about that. And then you go out for a drink and go, guess what we did today? What? None of the above. And everyone laughs with, you know, hilarious results. I don't think that would solve too much. But I understand the principle that if you do that with good intent, then you are at least registering an interest in the system, but a disquiet in those available to represent you. Or do we just leave it as it is? Finn, do we leave it as it is? Finn seems to love it. Finn loves it. The none of the above seems to be the most popular alternative. Fining people, I don't know. It seems to work in Australia. I don't know whether it makes their system better. It just means more people vote. Does it make the system better? Lenny in Ashford says, I believe the only way to fix the benefit bill priority is to leave all human rights, and then people would realise the government are serious. Until that happens, it is all talk. Then the rest will be easy. I obviously haven't watched that Koonsberg interview yet, by the way, but I've got a feeling she didn't ask him about immigration, because I think that would have been one of the things they might have released, unless they're saving that little belter for the end, where he says, oh yeah, we're leaving the ECHR, I've got the Royal Navy arriving, but Tuesday. Don't think that's going to be said somehow. But isn't that interesting that he's not mentioned something that is so central to the things that are on the average person's radar, for good reason as well. This will be Peter in Desborough. Peter, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Yourself?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, fire away.
Good. So, yeah, it's about the, you know, these people on people dip. About just before COVID, I had a proper breakdown. And going to the doctor, the first thing he said to me was, well, you need to get the tablets for you to get yourself on the right road. Mm-hmm. So after about 3 months, yeah, after about 3 attempts, they got the tablets right. And I started to think clearly again. But never in that 3 months did either one of us discuss not going back to work.
Right. So it just wasn't even part of that conversation?
No, never brought once. The only thing I said to him on day one was, I'm just a little bit concerned about work. He said, I'll worry about the work and you go back when you're ready. So fair enough, and that's how it went. So he organised a whole lot of support for me. And as I said, when I cleared my head, I went back to work. I took a lower paid job. But where I'm going with it is, I don't know whether it's post-COVID or something else, but I think a lot of it's not only the parents' fault, but I think it's doctors, because they did actually stop seeing people. And I think they were diagnosing people over a telephone call. So I think in some cases, doctors' priority should not be telling people when to go on the sick unless there is a problem. Yeah. But they should be just saying, look, we need to get you right.
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, COVID does appear to be the sort of go-to answer, doesn't it, as to what not necessarily created it, but it certainly increased it, this problem.
I think it may have, but I just think that doctors should concentrate on getting people right.
Yeah. Well, that is kind of that is the duty of the doctor, isn't it?
Yeah, there's always jobs you can do with anything, really. I mean, you know, I go to a company in Coventry that employ people with Down syndrome. You know, they give them little jobs. So it's not impossible for someone to go to work and earn a few quid.
Yeah, indeed. And that would be an example of people who've got an obvious challenge are able to be accommodated into the workplace. So, and if you look at some of the young people who are not registered with what you would call an obvious disability, I think you take the point, but it's a form of anxiety, not to underplay those who've got serious crippling problems, because I get that as well. But you know, the average person, I just can't believe all of these people that we're talking about are in this position.
Well, I had it described to me as anxiety and depression, or whatever it was I had, like breakdown, as it was a chemical in the brain that needed help. But once they got that balance right, you know, it's fine, you can go back to work. But I think a lot of it, if a doctor turned around and said to one of these, all of them, right, okay, if you're not going to work, that's you and your family's problem, not mine. Well, I'm just here to get you put right.
Yeah. Absolutely. But why have we got 430,000 people and that's just the 16 to 24-year-olds who are claiming sickness benefits because of things like anxiety. I mean, there's other issues in there as well. And again, we're not underplaying anything, but that's an awful lot of people that simply weren't there a few years ago.
I think if they didn't get picked, then, you know, because surely the parents are going to be taking board money, or what we used to pay board money, I would hope. But if this kid went on and said, well, I am on sick because I'm not going to work, but it's my decision, I think there might be a bit of a different conversation going on in that household.
I think you're right. Bang on, Peter. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note. This is from Baz. No, that's coming in a moment. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can message us on 87222. R.I.P. Zippy, by the way. Did you Google Zippy, Finn? Did you have a look? Oh, hang on. Now, Finn, who's like 12, is telling us that he knew who Zippy was. And George? George was Zippy's best friend. No, he wasn't a dog. What was George? George was a hippopotamus, I think. Zippy was just a nothing. He was just a kind of weird puppet. With a zip, more like a Pac-Man face. I never thought of it like that. With a zip across it, and if he spoke, he was quite a big-headed character. And Rainbow was like one of the few kids shows that was on the TV. And Jeffrey was the presenter. Bungle was the bear, and Zippy and George were the puppets. And then Rod, Jane, and Freddie, who were two men and a woman that seemed to live together in a house, which was always a bit interesting. What a lovely combination. It was classic stuff, and sadly the voice of Zippy, whose name is Ronnie LeDrew, who voiced Zippy, has died at the age of 78. That's very sad stuff, and so was Bill Oddie. Bill Oddie, who was known to one generation as the bloke from The Goodies, which was sort of a groundbreaking comedy trio. That really did tear the place up a little bit when it came to comedy. And when I say tear the place up, I mean changed some of the rules of TV comedy. But latterly, of course, became known as a bit of a twitcher. That does slightly underplay the seriousness with which he took wildlife and photography and all that went with it. Both on the site, Zippy and Bill Oddie. What about that? 0344 499 1000. 20 past 3. This is Talk.
We're not supposed to flick and flop with every spirit of the age, every woke ideology or every passing fad and trend that comes about. We are supposed to be called out and separate, and the scriptures upon which the foundations and the continuing faith is based is a blueprint for that formation and the continuation of the church as a living entity in society. We are supposed to be a part of the society, acting as the moral voice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
3:25. Dan's in Bristol. The issue is simple. If there is excess energy from the wind, stick a desalinization plant next to it so it can be generating clean water or hydrogen all the time. We could then use the hydrogen to generate electricity when needed. There is no need to switch the bloody thing off. I'd like to think, and I hear that sounds perfectly reasonable to me from Dan, but you'd like to think that the people whose world this is would have thought about that. I mean, there might be one of them listening going, what? Never even thought about the hydrogen thing. So I don't know. Who knows what the answer would be to that? 0344 499 1000. We'll find out shortly if we've got a winner on the Voice of Doom. This is Grace in Ealing, firstly. Grace, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
One of the things that I don't hear mentioned very often is that the cost of net zero, and very often I hear people on this radio station complain about the cost of net zero, a part of that expenditure is spending on the grids to upgrade the system so that this electricity from the wind, which currently is being wasted, actually isn't wasted and is put to use. So if we spend money on improving the grids, then we don't need to have wind turbines being turned off for a part of the time. Instead, that wind energy can all be utilised. And we talk about this cost of net zero as being somehow wasted, but actually some of that cost is making it possible for all wind energy in future to be used rather than the serious mess we have right now where some of it's being thrown away.
So you're talking about some of it goes into investment, which I think has always been the case, hasn't it? It's a bit like when you buy a train ticket. You know, you look at the pie chart of how it's divvied up, and the actual profit bit for, you know, the kind of boardroom, the rich old duffers, as we always hear about, is actually quite tiny, and the biggest chunk is reinvestment back into the system. But that doesn't mean to say that the reinvestment is always going to work in the way that perhaps some people think.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's all very well saying we can get the wind thing, you know, more efficient, but that does, as our previous guest said, it doesn't mean that we're going to run the whole country solely on wind. So if we've got a disproportionate amount of emphasis on wind and solar, the argument that sort of counters what you're saying, Grace, is that that's a fool's errand, because it's never, ever going to be able to replace everything.
No one's suggesting that all of the energy in the country is going to come from wind. But when people complain about the cost of net zero, it sometimes seems as though what they're not considering is that is, as you said, investment, which will mean that going forwards, energy costs eventually are going to be lower and our system will be more efficient. Ultimately, the network that we currently have right now is not as efficient as it could be in making use of the wind energy and other resources that we have. Ultimately, fossil fuels are going to run out. Even if it weren't the case that they were causing climate change, which they are, they would still run out eventually. But we do have to and are going to invest in a system that means we can use renewable energy, which eventually will be more cost-effective and won't contribute to climate change and wildfires as we're currently seeing. You mentioned earlier that some people have talked about migrants coming across in boats because of climate change. Now, I don't know to what extent the people we see rocking up in small boats are individuals who have specifically fled climate change affected regions, but there certainly are people in the global south being affected by climate change. I don't know that those are the same people who end up over here in small boats, but there are people who are fleeing their own homes or the regions that they live in because famines have been made worse due to rising temperatures or droughts have been made worse, and that's really horrifying. I mean, it's really grim here if we can't water our flowers, for example, or we have to put up with really uncomfortably hot weather. But the fact that there are some human beings who in really hot weather don't even have taps they can turn on, or who are more affected by mosquito-borne diseases because temperatures are getting warmer and they don't have a fridge, in their kitchens like we do. That's a grim situation.
No, I get that. I get that. And naturally, as climate changes, and nobody disputes that climate changes, obviously there will be parts of the world, and as you rightly say, in the last couple of months, we've had sort of temperatures that I don't think have gone below about 24 degrees, and on many weeks they've regularly been at 34 degrees. So, and we know what that feels like. So to be in a place where you have no options, I mean, we talk about, have you got aircon or not? No, I haven't. No, most people haven't. You're right. We're talking about people who haven't got a fridge or people who haven't got a backyard that they can grow something in.
When we talk about international development aid, I know a lot of people listening to the station don't support that, but the reality is that while people like me want international aid because I really do care about the human beings affected by global crises and extreme poverty, actually our politicians have instigated international aid because they want for Britain's best interest. They put international aid in place because they're trying to think, well, how can we get our way on the global scene? And that's part of why some of the money doesn't end up helping people as effectively as possible, because our politicians are thinking, how can we influence their politicians to do what we want? And so I wish that it was all as effective as possible in helping the poorest people, but actually our politicians are trying to make international aid work in Britain's interest. It's not.
Indeed. I mean, I think I think it's both, to be honest, Grace. I mean, I think there is literally aid that is needed, and I think there's also that idea that, fast forward 20 years when that country's back on its feet, who's it going to turn to for, business, trades or whatever other, it'll turn to us. So there's that. I don't think it's that bothers people the most. I think there are two things, really. One is when you do hear about wastage, and it's got a lot better than it used to back in the day when you just knew that international aid was being used to buy a gold-plated Rolls-Royce for some dictator. Those days are largely gone. But I think there is also an affordability thing, which is not it's not an unreasonable question to debate on this as to whether Ukraine is a great example. You've got Andy Burnham meeting Zelensky this afternoon, Burnham has promised essentially to carry on the same level of funding and the like. And whilst I get the seriousness, I understand it's an invasion on our own European soil, not EU, European soil, there is also a point where you could legitimately raise the question about how much of this can we realistically afford. I hear you. Grace, thank you very much indeed for that. Ian in Bloxwich says bungle, as in rainbow, would put his pyjamas on at the end of the day, meaning the rest of the time he was stark naked. Disgusting. There was something weird about that bear, wasn't there? I mean, there was something really weird about that bear. Maybe it was the pyjama thing. Now you've said it as an adult, Ian. I didn't clock that as a kid, I would imagine. We've got the Voice of Doom coming up in a moment. Stand by for that. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 4. We've been talking on and off about compulsory voting. There are parts of the world where this already happens, but it's reportedly being considered by Andy Burnham's most senior advisors, with proposals suggesting a £10 fine for anyone who fails to turn up at the ballot box. I wonder how that bit works. Let's speak to Dr. David Klempura, who is Research Assistant at the Institute for Policy Research at Bath University. David, good afternoon to you. And we know Australia sort of famously seems to be the go-to example of where they do this. It does apparently increase turnout, I think widely around about 90% compared to, what, 50-odd, 60-odd% at some of our general elections. So are the reasons behind this, as far as you can see, or as far as you would assess, are the reasons that it makes a nation more democratic, more responsible? What's actually going on here?
So I think there are a few different reasons why there's a growing consensus, I think, in favour of compulsory voting. The first, I think, is about a problem of legitimacy. I think it's much harder for governments to be able to claim a mandate, to be able to claim to speak for the public as a whole, when large swathes of the public didn't vote in elections at all and didn't participate in the process by which we decide our governments. But I also think there's an important question here of incentives, which is, our democracy works on the basis that governments have an incentive to serve the public interest because they know that if they do so, they're more likely to be re-elected, and if they don't serve the public interest, people will vote them out. But that gets warped if only some parts of the public actually vote. And so what we end up with is politicians who are incentivized to cater to the interests of those parts of the public that do vote and not pay so much attention to the interests of the kinds of people who vote less. And the risk is that you end up with a bit of a vicious cycle, which is that some groups of people aren't served by politics. They think politics isn't for them. They stop voting. And so politicians pay even less attention to their interests. And so the whole process starts again. And I think that with turnout falling in the way that it has over past decades and with some of the kind of political outcomes we've seen in Britain, I think that's a real issue. And I think that compulsory voting offers a chance to reset democracy, to ensure that everyone is participating, and really change the incentives that politicians have.
So politicians, either knowingly or unwittingly, almost adopt a sort of slight complacency, knowing that only a small percent, relatively small, percentage of people voted for them. So I can understand that, and we know that that happens in lots of other ways. You know, the Labour Party are perfectly relaxed about annoying a bunch of farmers because they're probably, I don't know, Tories or Lib Dems. We know that, you know, governments do have their own little agendas, and maybe that's just the way it is. I wonder if the other benefit of, you know, well, perhaps for me, the main benefit I could see with compulsory voting is that it works as, if nothing else, a gentle reminder for those that would have voted but just sort of forgot.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think when we think about people not voting in elections, it's not the case that most people are, you know, point blank refusing to vote and they oppose the idea and they don't want to do it. It's just that it's something that hasn't become a habit for people. And I think if you look at a country like Australia that does have compulsory voting, there's a different kind of culture and mindset about it. People really think about it as a civic duty, and election days take on this kind of celebratory atmosphere. There's the sense that this is a moment when we all come together and do our part as citizens, and that's something that, you know, it's an obligation on us, but it's also something to celebrate. And, you know, they have the democracy sausage, the barbecues outside polling stations.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing.
The democracy sausage, is that literally what it's called?
That's what it's called, yes.
Well, I mean, I think that would certainly, if they threw a few beers in, or a few tinnies, as they would say down there, into the equation, then maybe we're onto something here, David. You know, there's nothing people like more than a bit of a sweetener.
I think that's exactly what we should do. I think we should have election days where, you know, there's a bit of carrot and stick. There's an expectation that you as a citizen will go and vote, and there should be a legal duty to do so.
Yeah.
And, you know, a fine if you don't, a small fine. But at the other hand, we should see it as something to celebrate, and we should have a bit of celebration around it.
Is there any reason why the fines, and this, as I understand it, is pretty much the same to this day in Australia, it's not a particularly large fine, and we're hearing stories here. I mean, look, this is not even a policy, but this you know how governments work. They sort of drip out a few ideas so that we can all talk about it, and then they sort of gauge from that rather crude litmus test of discussions such as the one we're having. I'd like to think this is going to be played back on Andy Burnham's iPad at about 10:30 tonight after he's finished looking at all those Twitter comments. But who knows? 10 quid fine. I mean, you get, you know, the cheapest parking ticket you can get fined is 25 quid. Why is it so low? Or is there a sort of an intellectual reason behind that?
Well, I think the point is basically that the point of these fines aren't to punish people, and the point of compulsory voting isn't to punish people. It's really to change the culture around democracy and elections, and to emphasize that this is something you have to do, that this is a duty, and that it shouldn't be considered optional. But at the same time, I don't think people want to be fining people large amounts of money. So I think it's about making it more than anything else.
What about the idea that when people write none of the above on their vote, on their ballot sheet, we often hear that as an argument that should be an option, which would improve the democratic process. So for those who don't want to vote for a party, they can prove statistically they are engaged, because that would count as an answer. Now, it also frankly sounds a slight waste of time and all a bit worthy, but I sort of also understand the point.
No, I think that would be a very good idea. I think the evidence is that people do really want that. I've spoken to lots of people who say that they're broadly supportive of compulsory voting, but having a none of the above option would be really important to them. And I think it'd be good to have that there, because I think it would be good to separate out people forgetting to vote, people not bothering to vote, people spoiling the ballot by mistake, and people actively wanting to say, I don't like the options facing me. I think it's always good if you can create new mechanisms by which the public can communicate to political leaders how they're thinking, how they're feeling. And I think a none of the above option would be a way to do that, while also making very clear that compulsory voting isn't about forcing people to vote in ways they don't want to.
Well, I think we definitely need a reset. I mean, we currently live in a world, David, where one of the most famous politicians is a bloke with a bin on his head. So, I mean, anything that's going to re-engage us to take seriously the democratic process, then that's got to be a good thing, right?
I'd agree, and I think that there's an agenda here about citizenship, and we talk a lot about citizenship and what it means to be British, but I also think we need to be thinking about the duties and responsibilities that we all have, and we shouldn't just think about things in terms of, you know, rights that we're owed, but we have to think about what we owe to other people. And I think part of that is, in a democracy, we have to take seriously the notion that politics is all of our business and democracy is all of our business, and we have a duty to make that system work, and it's a system that relies on us expressing our preferences at elections, so we should be doing that.
Is there any evidence, just a final point, to suggest that making voting compulsory enamors any particular group more than any other to come out to the ballot box? Does it favour left-wingers or right-wingers, or has nobody looked into that? Because that would be rather interesting to know.
So the evidence is that there isn't really a clear partisan impact in compulsory voting. And I think that's because what it does is it changes the incentives facing all political parties. So we know that it encourages young people to vote more in particular. Young people are one of the demographics that's currently least likely to vote. And under compulsory voting, young people vote more. But what happens there is it's not the case that we get results that are more left-wing or more right-wing, but rather all political parties, left or right, spend more time engaging with the needs and concerns of young voters. And I think that's a very good thing, and I think that's something that basically everyone should be able to get behind.
David, great to have you on. What a great discussion. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate that. Dr. David Klemperer, he's the Research Assistant at the Institute for Policy Research at Bath University. Would that enamour you to get there? Or would you just go, I'll pay the £10 fine rather than vote? Should we quickly do the voice of doom here, Finn? That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it? I want to know if we've got a winner. Let's, because around about an hour ago now, we played you the mystery voice. Remember, it's always political. This was the voice.
The men and the women fight.
Let's hear that again.
The men and the women fight.
These are some of the guesses. Angela Merkel. No. Golda Meir. No. Uri Geller. It does sound a bit Uri Geller-ish. It really does. Uri Geller used to come in here a lot in the old TalkSport, and I have seen him do the spoon bending in front of my eyes. So literally in front of my eyes, at close quarters. And he said these words.
The men and the women fight.
And then the spoon bend. They would imagine it just went like a kind of cartoon sound effect. No, it's not Uri Geller. Desmond Tutu, no. Manny Pacquiao, no. Bianca Jagger. How did somebody come up with Bianca Jagger? Of all the random... I love it, but of all the random names, we have not got a winner, which means it rolls over to tomorrow. Mandy is in Northumberland. What have you got for us, Mandy? Good afternoon.
Hiya, Ian.
Hiya.
Lovely to see you. I just wanted to speak about... kids working, I'm 51 and I've worked from when I was 14. God, I used to do a Saturday and a Sunday in a cafe for a tenner, and
nice.
I was dead chuffed with myself.
Of course you were. It was always those kind of jobs, wasn't it? It was either in the cafe or you were in the supermarket. I worked in a chippy as well. It was that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and my girls, I've got two girls, and one's coming up 21, the other one's 28, and I swear they've worked from when they were 16, and really a food chain, pub, restaurant, and my God, it was like a cattle market, but they stuck it out.
You got to stick it out, and what you just said, I think everybody's mentioned this, Mandy. When you got that tenner in your hand at the end of that weekend, I mean, it felt like the best thing in the world, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I had a friend that she used to get an allowance from a mum and dad. I never got that from my mum and dad. No. I worked for that. I was chuffed to bits with it.
I got pocket money up to a point, but then that disappeared, didn't it? Definitely didn't keep on getting it when you started doing a little job.
When you said about your jeans earlier,
go to buy the jeans.
And honestly, I don't know what it is with today. I'm like, please get a bit of bloody pride, man.
Get some pride. It's in your jeans, isn't it? Or it's not. There you go. Maybe it's that. Mandy, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. Ashford Market used to be I don't know whether it's just through the eyes of your memory looking back on it. It was absolutely... So Ashford Market was like a market, as in pigs and sheep and cows being auctioned off in the week. And then at the weekend, the space was an actual market. And it had loads of stuff going on. There was the fella that sold, I can still see the bloke's face, it sold all the moody football stuff. I think all of my Chelsea tops I bought from that place. I don't know what they were made of. I'm surprised I haven't got eczema or leprosy. This kind of stuff was just made of, like, really dicey kit. But you could afford it, and all the other memorabilia there and the sweet stuff. And, of course, what you do, you try to get down there and buy, because that was the place to buy all your bargains, your jeans and God knows what. And then you might have, you know, there was a shop called Jeans and Things, I've just remembered that, which sold, what was it, jeans and things. And that was a sort of notch up. That's when you started getting into Levi and Wrangler territory. Yeah. Do Wrangler still exist? Oh, Finch told me they made a comeback. That's good, because I think I've got about 80 pairs in the loft. Through the different variants, I've got from drain pipe to flares, you know, and then back again. And then back again, because it does that, doesn't it? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
We're not supposed to flip and flop with every spirit of the age, every woke ideology or every passing fad and trend that comes about. We are supposed to be called out and separate, and the scriptures upon which the foundations and the continuing faith is based is a blueprint for that formation and the continuation of the church as a living entity in society. We are supposed to be a part of the society, acting as the moral voice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from John in Perth, who says it always sounds easy to stick infrastructure to mop up excess energy, but it's never economic because the amount of excess energy is small and unpredictable. Infrastructure costs are expensive and mostly fixed, and the customer expect reliable outputs. It doesn't make the business sense. Yeah, I guess you could just extend that point that John's made there, which is bang on, and say, well, actually, why don't we add extra to all your energy bills to or whatever bill for that matter, to go back into research and development and repairs and God knows what else. And it can be even more efficient than it currently is. And we can put it into new forms of, hydrogen, whatever it happens. You could do that. Of course, you could keep going with that one, couldn't you? Let's go to Lynn in Ramsgate. Lynn, how are you doing?
Oh, hello, Ian. I'm doing well, and it's a super show today.
Thank you very much indeed. Now
That's why I'm up so late watching it.
So you're in Australia?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic.
And
so you're not in Ramsgate, Kent. You're in Ramsgate, Australia.
Yes. I rang because I was very interested in the suggestion of the 10% inheritance tax on homes.
Yes.
And I feel very much so that it should come to be. With the situation at the moment, with the £325,000 threshold before any inheritance tax is paid, and plus, if you have a child or a grandchild that you leave the home to, that is added on, so it makes it £500,000. That's going begging, and people aren't paying anything up to those two rates, depending on which one they fall in, and whether their home is owned or passed on to a child. And I did a quick sum, and I think it ought to be 20%, not 10%.
Interesting.
Because you're missing out. The UK is missing out on all those people who do own homes and have had the benefit of a home most of their lives, or since they at least saved and bought for one, just as those above the threshold of £325,000 who get charged 40% inheritance tax, including the home. And I did a calculation that 20% on up to £325,000, if it was £325,000, is £65,000 tax on death, and if they have the part that is allowed to go to a child, then it's £35,000, which is £100,000 that is going begging, simply because not every home is taxed. Because if they're below the £325,000 threshold of assets, then there's a large percentage of those that are just going completely untaxed, and yet they've had the benefit of everything within the country.
That's a very good point.
Also, I heard recently, I can't remember where, but I heard recently, I'm in my 70s and I tend to read these sort of articles. I heard recently that the average time, and this is spent in care, not just home care, to care to the home, but the average time spent in a nursing home is approximately 80 weeks. At the end of one's life.
Right, okay.
And, yes, and £100,000 would at least provide 66 weeks at £1,500 a week. That's helping towards the state cost care.
Yeah. So what about, of course, the argument that seems to really upset people is that those that have no assets in any shape or form, savings or house to leave, will benefit from all of this, and those that have saved hard, worked hard and bought a house and been responsible will be paying for everybody else.
Well, that's the true social care part of it, isn't it? In the fact that those that have are helping to pay for those that don't, for whatever reason that they don't have. You nor I can judge that, but there are people in the world like that. I mean, we have it here in Australia as well, but it just happens.
Sure.
Our unemployment isn't as bad as I think as yours is. Ours is only running at about 4.4% at the moment, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's the same as it was in peak financial times back in the mid-2000s in Australia. So it's 4.4% is really not bad, but we still have situations where people don't have homes or don't own homes, and a terrible rental crisis, just like you do in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel that there should be some form of paying back to the country of other services such that you might have had during your lifetime, such as a stay in a hospital when you were 45 years old, or you broke your leg skiing, or
Because generally speaking, as I understand it, Lynn, you only really use your health payments in the last sort of 5 years of your life, if you were to work it out financially. And then when you do use it, particularly if you've got some kind of chronic illness, then you tend to way exceed anything you've put in. Strange as that sounds to many people, say, I've paid into this all my life. But actually, if you're having, 5 years of cancer treatment, that's going to be way more than anything you ever contributed. Listen, Lynn, I've got to run, but you've been brilliant. What a great to get an Aussie voice on this. That's Lynn in Ramsgate, which is south of Sydney, by the way, in Australia. Thank you to her. She is actually British, by the way, I think I'm right in saying, although obviously has now an Aussie tinge. Is that the right word? Is that the right word, Kev?
I don't know, Ian. I lived in California for 10 years. I never even got even a hint of an American accent. And there are like all these British people who would arrive to live there, and within about 6 months, they sounded like John Wayne or something. So there are these people who just want to get the local accent.
The local accent, yeah.
I mean, I know friends there now, English people who've lived there for, excuse me, for 40 years and still, that sounds as if they never left Britain. So.
Whereas others...
Yeah, the obtaining of accents usually is voluntary. You do it yourself. You either sort of rile against it or you accept it, and I riled against it.
Glad you did, Kev. What's going on after the news?
Well, I think we'll probably focus, among other things, on... old King Andy has been on the